global branding strategies.
Did you just whip together a showbot in 20 minutes?
Yeah, the only thing is I can't get Ajax to work.
Yeah, I saw that you use forms for the buttons.
Yeah, I did. If I had like 10 more minutes, I could get Ajax working, but I don't. So here we are.
But did you find IRC code somewhere, or did you actually write that too?
Oh, there's no bot. There's no bot. It's literally just a form. I have no idea how to make an IRC bot. And that was probably not going to fit in my 20-minute budget to build this thing.
I was really starting to doubt my own self-worth when you said, I had to whip this together in 20 minutes. I'm thinking, how the hell did he get an IRC bot in 20 minutes? Node is like the king of or queen or whatever, or what have you, of having packages to do everything under the sun. And I doubt I could whip together an IRC bot in Node in 20 minutes.
Yeah, you could. You could just download the IRC bot library and you just instantiate it, give it a channel and a nickname, and then tell it what to look for. Like, it's the library does everything for you. You know what I mean? It's just a question of finding that library.
Yeah, and try to find it for PHP.
You know, the Showbot code is open sourced, I think. You could have just... So why don't you use that?
I was racing people in the chat, seeing who could finish first, me rewriting it or them trying to get this installed, because it's a Ruby thing and it's full of dependencies and all this other crap. And I don't know how to host Ruby, so I figured I could rewrite it faster in my hosted framework than the time it would take to figure out Ruby.
I want to make fun of you so badly, but I don't know crap about Ruby.
Right. I mean, could you have set it up in 20 minutes on a server?
Probably not. Oh, goodness. All right. Well, apologies in advance if I'm cranky tonight. A little stressed out. A lot of things going on in the Liss household, trying to keep it all under control. Not really succeeding. So to make me feel better, let's start by making fun of PHP. John?
What?
Yeah. That's you would know if you looked at the notes file. Anyway.
I was a little busy.
Yeah, just a disclaimer up front. This is not my normal voice. This is my I'm sick voice. I've done many podcasts with my I'm sick voice, including, I think, like at least 4 of the 6 hours of Star Wars podcasts in the Incomparable I did with this voice. But anyway, we'll get through this. Which is kind of a shame, because next week we're not recording an episode, and presumably I'll be better by then.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of, we're recording on, what is today? Thursday, the 22nd. So just like we talked about last episode, if we say something extraordinarily stupid, it's because of time shift issues, not because we're actually unintelligent.
All right. So quick follow-up, a bunch of corrections follow-up. First one is that I didn't notice this when we were recording the podcast, but when I listened back to it, I noticed that Marco made some bold claims about PHP being faster than JavaScript. A bunch of people wrote in to tell us that this is not the case. If I had been paying better attention, I would have tried to call him on it, but apparently I wasn't.
I was kind of surprised that you didn't at the time.
I didn't even remember hearing it.
As soon as I said it, I realized, this is probably wrong.
Yeah. So Gingy sent us a bunch of links to benchmarks. We'll put this one in the show notes, showing how incredibly slow PHP is compared to JavaScript. And again, it has nothing to do specifically with the language. It's what we were talking about on that show. JavaScript has had so much engineering resources put towards making it fast. PHP, less so.
The core PHP runtime seems like it's been held together by sticks and duct tape for its entire lifetime. And that's why Facebook was able to come in and make such a massive upgrade with HHVM performance. My point was not that PHP is the fastest language. I didn't mean to say that. That was kind of me stumbling around my words, trying to say my actual point, my intended point, which was that PHP, like, no one's ever really complained that PHP is slow. It's not like the PHP being slow has never really been a problem for most people, unless you're operating at Facebook scale. It's fast enough, and it's not like performance has never really been PHP's problem.
Yeah, the thing with all these quote unquote language performance benchmarks is they always end up doing stuff like they end up doing like integer and floating point math, right? An arrays of integers and floats, and calculating fractals and playing the game of life and doing things that no one will ever ask one of these dynamic languages to do. Because if you try to do anything math related or anything with like densely packed structures, of course the language that uses like native ints and can use like the add operation on your CPU is going to destroy the thing that where every single variable is this crazy ass struct with a million different things in it. Best case scenario is a big struct. Worst case is something even worse. Of course you're going to get slaughtered by someone doing, native operations versus that. But these languages are used mostly to manipulate strings. And if you do string manipulation stuff, like who can run regular expressions with, Unicode handling against huge strings and intelligently replace things and stuff like that. And suddenly these dynamic languages, even the slow ones that don't have a lot of attention paid to them, start looking a lot better. So I don't pay too much attention to these benchmarks because every dynamic language gets slaughtered when, calculating fractals, and who cares, because that's not what they're being asked to do.
Right. Like what matters most when you're using one of these languages, what matters most is like how much can it handle on servers in real life applications? Like how many concurrent connections, how many users, how much can you fit, per server or per CPU unit of performance, or, per dyno if you're on some virtualized thing, how much can it handle? And that's related to lots of things besides low-level math performance. And it's in those areas that almost all modern languages and frameworks do pretty well at that, and platforms and web servers and everything. Like modern standards are pretty high for that, and you can go like Apache versus Nginx versus built-in servers and stuff like that, and you can get into a lot of nitty-gritty there. But the fact is, they're all pretty fast these days because they're all pretty well designed, and pretty much any language you use on a reasonably hosted stack can handle a lot.
That's why Node is such an interesting hack, because it's like, well, there's this language that we're all forced to use that tons of people have worked really hard to make fast. Why don't we just use that on the server? Because then we can, it's the V8 JavaScript engine that Google wrote that's super fast. We'll just do that on the server. It sounds crazy, but it's like, hey, someone already did the work. So here's a vaguely dynamic language that someone has already made fast for us, and then we can concentrate and do interesting things on top of that engine.
Let me interrupt you real quick. What you were saying about performance on dynos and whatnot reminds me that I had somebody from Heroku reach out to me and say, hey, we heard you talking about how I had thought that I'd hit some internal dashboard because of the traffic I got via Marco about the post about Erin being pregnant. Well, firstly, I think I misread the URL, and I do not think that that was an internal app, and people from Heroku have since confirmed that anyway. But secondly, somebody from Heroku wrote me, and I don't have his name handy, and I apologize, but wrote me and said, in so many words, your dyno was well under control and not really getting taxed that badly at all. And that was when Google Analytics was reporting roughly 500 concurrent users in the real-time tab. And I think I got somewhere around 10 or 15,000 hits over the course of that day that I posted that. So to your point, in the right situation, it's really not that bad. Node is not that bad on the server side. So I'm sorry. Speaking of Node.
Yeah, we were talking about JavaScript modularization and the different systems for use, and I said that I thought Node.js used AMD. It doesn't. It uses CommonJS, which is another one of those standards. And there's also, someone pointed out to me, the ECMAScript 6 modules thing. The ECMA is I don't know what it stands for, but it's the standard for JavaScript, and they've been marching on making new standards for the language well ahead of what browsers are implementing. But if you look at the later ones, there's a lot of interesting things in there, including a formal language-supported way to do modules. I have another link in here in the notes to this ES6 module transpiler that will lets you write your JavaScript using the ES6 module syntax and then compile it into either AMD or CommonJS modules. And all these things are trying to accomplish the same task, sort of provide, keep things out of each other's namespace and provide a formal interface for defining what a module is, what it's named, what it exports, and all that other stuff. So yeah, it's a great thing about standards. So many to choose from.
All right. So additionally, you had mentioned, I don't remember if it was the regular show or the quote unquote after show, but we had talked about iPhone earbuds, and you were fairly devout in your belief that the iPhones do not come with earbuds. Marco and I explained that you were wrong. And then you had intended to go on a treasure hunt for some of Tina's earbuds. What was the result of that? I
did find them. I asked her where the box was, and she didn't tell me. Maybe she didn't want to tell me. But on my own, I found the box, and in the box, lo and behold, completely, still in the little plastic shrink wrappy whatever stuff, were the earphones with a clicker. I found the iPhone 5S box. I bet the ones in the 4S box are still there as well, because again, I have never seen one in this house, so I think we've just never unpacked them. So I unpacked the 5S clicker, and I was wearing it tonight when I was doing dishes and stuff. I don't know if it's going to solve my problem, because already there's two issues I see with the little clicker thing. Well, that's three. One issue, which is not really the fault of the iPhones, I think, is the headphones, I think, is that I get a little bit of like static. Like when I twist, if I just twist the little connector, I get a little bit of crinkly static, and maybe I have some dirt or something inside my iPod Touch's headphone connector that only shows up with like that like the little plug has little extra segments for the clicker, the contacts. That contact might be a little bit screwed up, so that's kind of annoying.
It shouldn't be audible because I believe it just uses the microphone contact for that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about these, but like if I put in my regular headphones, I don't hear any clicking. And, this is just in my pocket. I wasn't intentionally doing it. I took it out and I said, what the hell is that? And if I just twist it, I can hear it crinkle, crinkle. So who knows? It's probably just dirt or something inside my connector. What can you do?
Could also be that earbuds are pieces of crap.
Oh, would you stop it with that? Well, earbuds are not bad, or not good, rather.
Just listening to podcasts. Who cares? The second thing is, and I understand why this did this because there's a microphone in it, I really wish that the clicker was lower down on the thing because I don't want to reach up that high to click the click. I'd rather click lower down. But obviously, if they're going to make it a mic, they have to make it up higher. So I kind of understand why they did that. And the third thing is also related to where it is. It means that one of the earphones has different weighting and different sort of, when I turn my head around and everything, one of the things is going to fly out and pull out more because it has an extra weight on it there. And it makes my right ear, the earbud in my right ear, start to work its way loose faster and more aggressively than the one in my left ear does. And I find that a little annoying.
Wow.
It is of no surprise to me that you have immediate complaints. Also, I should note that if I'm correct, using ear pods. Is that right? Is that what they call the new earbuds?
Yeah. The weird ones that don't have a rubber gasket around them and that kind of like go into your ear.
Right. Whereas the 4S, I believe, came with the old earbuds, which didn't have a formal name to my recollection.
Yeah. I like the earpods. They fit my ears reasonably well, and I like the idea that there's not anything that's going to wear off on them.
Well, that's not true at all. It just might take a little bit longer.
Well, what's going to come off, though? There's no like, it's just a solid piece of two solid pieces of plastic stuck. I suppose the two pieces of plastic could come apart, but that seems much less likely than that stupid rubber thing coming off.
I mean, the way most headphones die is internal fraying of the cable where it meets the headphone. Or occasionally where it meets the jack end, but usually it's the headphone end. Almost always, because that's just, it's one of those strain boot points, and the strain boots never really do that much, and that's it.
I've never had a pair of AirPods, and I didn't have the original iPod. I believe the first one I got was the terrible one with the 4 touch buttons on it. I guess that was the 3rd generation or something. Anyway, I've never had a pair of Apple earbuds go bad. Like, they all still work. So I think I'm really gentle on them. And speaking of being gentle on them, one of the things people were suggesting to solve the problem of like, when someone walks up to you, you got to fish the iPod out of your pocket and turn it off if you don't have the clicker or whatever. Said, just yank the headphone jack out because that'll stop playback. Yeah, it will, but you'll destroy your headphones doing that. You'll probably destroy the jack too, but you'll definitely destroy the headphones. They're not designed to be yanked out repeatedly, so that is not a viable option for me.
One thing I actually looked into as a potential feature for Overcast is to allow you to just tap the phone really hard with your finger while it's in your pocket and allow that to mimic the clicker controls. I
thought of that, and I was going to suggest that to you, but then I thought about it a little longer, and I said, this is a terrible idea.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I mean, I tried like reading some of the accelerometer data to see if I could reliably detect that versus any other kind of motion, and it was just really hard. I don't think it would ever be good enough to like reliable enough to detect that without having a bunch of false positives. And
you don't want to encourage people to be whacking their iOS devices, even if it's just a fingertip, because once you open that door, how human nature, you'll tap harder and you'll tap it again. And it's like,
right.
I gotta make a Raymond Williams reference, but you've never even heard of that movie.
Nope.
That's all right. Finger go right through the iPhone. Boom.
What?
Okay.
I'll get a show notes link for it. Go ahead.
We are sponsored this week, once again, by our friends at Dash. Go to thedash.com, THE-.com. Not an actual dash. This is like that McSweeney's hard to pronounce email addresses. THEDASH.com. So it's not like a hyphen or anything. Anyway, go to thedash.com/ATP. And this is really cool. They basically allow you to build your own custom dashboard, and it can be public or private. And there's also, you can fill it up with all sorts of widgets, and you can customize it. You can make your own widgets. You can do You can do widgets for things like your site traffic or recent tweets or your recent GitHub commits if you're a developer. All sorts of things, social activity, traffic activity, all sorts of things. If you can picture a graph or a status widget for it, they probably have it or can or will add it. It's really great. So they have a bunch of pre-built widgets for you to use. They're adding more all the time. Vanity searches, all sorts of stuff you can put up there. A lot of it, like we compared it last week to Panic's excellent status board app for iPad. It's kind of like that for the web, and in my opinion, pretty well expanded from that. They do a lot more. A lot more comes with it. Really great. Dashboards from Dash look great on a TV if you want. You can connect it via Apple TV or via a Chromecast. The pricing model is really quite simple. It's a lot like GitHub, so you can always create unlimited public dashboards for free. And if you sign up, you can create one private dashboard for free, and then if you want, you can just pay $10 a month to have unlimited private dashboards. So you can have internal stuff kept private for your company or whatever. But if you want to go there, play with it, create a public dashboard, go right ahead. That's free. You can even get one private dashboard for free. Really great thing. Go to thedash.com/ATP, run by great people. I met one of them last year, and really nice guy, and big fan of us. And so if you go to thedash.com/ATP, you can even see the dashboards that he made for me, John, and Casey, and they're actually pretty funny. So definitely check that out. Really cool. Thanks a lot to Dash, once again, thedash.com/ATP, for sponsoring our show.
A couple of people were asking on Twitter about different widgets, because you mentioned widgets to interface different services and stuff. And if you go to support.thedash.com, you can vote on basically the next widgets that they'll introduce. So there's ideas from the community for widgets they want, and you can vote up the ones that you want to see. So it's obviously an expandable platform, and they're adding widgets as they're demanded.
So tell us about your Accord.
Yeah, so last week I said that I couldn't figure out how to get, or I thought it didn't see my iPod Touch at all, but many people who have an Accord of the same vintage and iPod Touches of the same vintage said, no, it'll find it. And so I took another run at it, and sure enough, it's just because the interface is terrible. Like, it's got this thing that says connect new device, and then it says search for devices, and it says searching, and then this voice comes over and tells you if your device is incompatible, go to blah, 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 and just searching, and then it says no devices found. And I thought that was it, looking for devices, but apparently there's a whole other feature where you have to say, like, I don't know what the difference between searching for a device and adding a new device is, but they're different functions. And I don't even remember how I found it. Eventually, I found my way to a different menu, which is not searching for a device, but adding a new device, which is somehow a different thing. And it did find my iPod Touch. So the next time I commute to work, I will do so in Bluetooth glory.
You're going to see. You're going to become a convert. It's really, really convenient. Like that. This is what I was saying last episode. I think this was edited out, but being able to get in the car and just have it start playing is just so much better and more convenient than having to plug in for any reason. Like it's worth not having your phone charged during your car ride, just for that convenience. And anything that cars do that requires me to plug in, I'm going to have a really hard time convincing myself that's worth doing now, because it's just so nice to just get in, it starts playing. When you turn the car off, it pauses. Done.
I still got to plug in my headphones for the walk from the parking garage to the office. So there's still a little bit. I had to do that anyway with the iPod Shuffle, but yeah, now I've got the clicker for that too. So
is that long enough to justify rocking headphones?
Oh yeah, definitely. You go down 6 flights of stairs, up 3 flights of stairs. I mean, and walk from the garage to the building. We don't all live in the rural Virginia where your parking spot is right in front of your ground level office building.
I'm going to choose not to engage. So we should probably talk about WWDC predictions, because by the time this episode comes out, it will be mere days before the big event. And I wanted to start with hardware, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but there's been a lot of talk about larger iPhones, and it certainly does not stand to history or recent history that we'll see any new iPhones during WWDC. But that being said, let's suppose, even if it doesn't happen during WWDC, let's suppose that there are, what are the two sizes? 4.7 and 5.5. 5.5.
Which is pretty big.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask Marco specifically, because you seemed most enthusiastic about these bigger sizes. Let's assume, just for the sake of conversation, that both 4.7 and 5.5 are real and they exist.
Oh, so much anxiety.
Okay, right. But let's also assume that the effective resolution is no different. So I don't recall exactly what resolution the iPhones are today, but whatever the size is that they blow it up to, they blow it up. There's no more effective real estate. Would you still want one? Or are you really excited for them strictly based on the thought that you could shove more things onto the screen?
Now, there was a rumor a couple of weeks back that iOS 8, I think this was on 9 to 5 Mac, that iOS 8 was going to include some kind of new resolution scaling feature. Possibly based on the way Mac OS 10 does it on the Retina MacBook Pros. If that actually happens, if there is some kind of feature where you can actually simulate higher resolutions or somehow adjust the size of things on screen and make everything small. I mean, there's universal text sizing, but that isn't that well supported yet. But if this feature exists and you can actually dynamically scale things, then I would probably be tempted to go with the big one. Or if the big one actually does have a higher resolution, I'd be pretty tempted to go for it. I'm not sure I would keep it. Like, the year after, I might go back to the quote small 4.7 inch size. I don't know. I'm curious to try it. I've never had a large screen phone, and I know a lot of people say they're too big, but a lot of people love them. And for how I use it, especially since I don't really use an iPad very often. I use my phone for everything that when I'm not at my computer. So I'd be really curious to try the big phone. That being said, if it's only a pure scale up in the resolution and there's not more pixels and it doesn't put in more capability to see more on screen with the same resolution, I'd have a really hard time justifying the bigger one because it's like, well, what am I really getting for that? I mean, and you are getting something like you could theoretically set the universal text size smaller and fit more on screen with text, but it wouldn't quite have the same effect.
Having also never had a larger phone, I don't see myself carrying a larger phone in my pocket, anything over 5 inches for sure. And I'm not overly enthusiastic about a 4.7 inch phone. But as with all things that I claim I either don't understand or don't like Macs and iPhones and BMWs and many other things I'm not thinking of, I'm sure I will probably come around on this. But I don't know. I don't have an overabundance of pocket space as it is, and I don't even fancy skinny jeans or anything like that. So I can't imagine having like a 5 inch plus phone sitting in my pocket all the time. That does not sound enjoyable to me.
I think a lot of people, Apple enthusiasts would end up getting it just like Margot said, just to see what it's like. Because presumably these people have only ever had iPhones. Like they've only been buying iPhones, haven't tried any other kind of phone. You're going to try it I guess you won't be able to tell from holding it in the store. You'll be like, well, I don't know. Like you'll want to just buy it, own it. You're going to get a new phone next year or the year after anyway. Give it a try. And then you'll find out probably within the first couple of weeks or couple of months if this is for you or not. But since it's a novelty in the Apple, iOS device space, I think a lot of people are going to buy it just to see what it's like. So Apple kind of gets an out in that regard. And regular people who aren't, listening to this podcast and aren't Apple enthusiasts, they're already buying big phones. So it's not a big deal to them. It's only a big deal to people like us.
Also, the screen might not be the only difference. Obviously, a larger phone can fit a larger battery, and some of that battery power is going to be spent lighting that larger screen, but probably not all of it. If they, assuming they have like the same, logic board, motherboard inside, and it's just, that same board plus larger battery in the bigger phone versus smaller battery in the smaller phone, you'd probably get better battery life in the bigger one. And it might not be by a whole lot, but I bet it would be noticeable. Secondly, if they do different thicknesses, and this is I talked about this on the talk show, which we'll get back to in a minute. I talked about this on the talk show a while back, talking about a big phone. But if they do different thicknesses, they might have different camera sensors, and camera sensors and phones, thickness tends to be the limiting factor in how good they can be. And that's why you see Android phones having these big blobby things where the camera is in the back, so they can make that thicker and put a nice sensor in there and nice optics. Because optics, like, you just get to physical limits where, like, you just need depth to make larger sensors, larger optics, things like that to make better image quality. So if and the rumors are that there's going to be this iPhone Air that it's the biggest one and it's super thin. If the big one is thinner and has a worse camera as a result, then that's going to be a pretty big downside for me, and I would almost certainly not get it. I would say if the cameras are different at all between the two sizes, and there's obviously this is assuming a lot. It's a disclaimer up front. This is assuming that there even are two iPhones. And by the way, we probably won't hear about them next week. We'll probably hear about them in the fall. But assuming that there are two phones, if there's any difference in the camera at all between them, I will almost certainly pick the one with the better camera, no matter what size it is.
You pre-derailed us, Casey. You put in stuff about a phone, which we all think is going to be released in September, in the section about WWDC predictions.
Well, yes, I'm sorry. I really wanted to ask Marco about this because sitting here now, like I said, I have no enthusiasm about a bigger phone, although clearly the rest of the planet quite literally does. So, I don't know. I just wanted to ask real fast.
Before we move on, and before we forget, speaking of the talk show, so Gruber announced on the talk show today that he's doing a live show at WWDC on, Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
And we will be the guests on that live show. So if we decided not to do our own live show because it's just a lot of work, and, he's doing one, and we'll just invade his. So if you want to hear us invade the talk show live at WWDC next week, tickets are not available right now as we record, but by the time we post this, they will be. So we'll put a link in the show notes. Look at the show notes basically and see. Tickets are probably going to go pretty quickly, so go quickly if you want to come, and hopefully we will see you there.
And where would people find those show notes?
Listen to the song. I don't know.
Yeah, see, but the song has to fit every episode. It says you can find the show notes at atp.fm, but in the Back to Work tradition, you have to give the full URL. And now that you've made the nice short URLs, you can do that, can't you?
Well, they're not that short. It's atp.fm/episodes/67, right? Is this number 67? Dan?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And also, you are lying. The atp.fm/67 should work.
That does work. Oh, my God.
So, atp.fm/67.
Once again, WWDC, Tuesday evening. I don't know what time, either 6 or 7.
6 to 9 at Mezzanine, which is a really nice venue.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show, so check it out.
And yes, we will all be there. I will be there in person. I'm flying out to do a live podcast. You're welcome.
We actually convinced him to do this.
Because I do not want to do a live podcast, and yet I am. So if you wanted to see me...
He doesn't want to do a live podcast. He doesn't want to fly.
No, I don't want to do this at all. But, I'll survive. So anyway, all three of us will be there in the flesh.
So, okay, WWDC stuff. Let's start with the rest of the hardware, the stuff that they actually may announce at WWDC. Do we see a Retina MacBook Air happening?
When they lowered the price on the current ones, when they revised them and took off $100, at first I thought that was a clear sign that they were making room for the one and only 12-inch Retina Air model. But then I thought maybe it's just their preemptive move because they don't have that ready and they just want to make these more attractive until they do have it ready, and now I can't decide.
Well, I think you're right because Intel's having some issues getting the next CPU. I believe it's Broadwell. Intel's having some issues with that, getting that on time. And so it's basically been pretty widely rumored, speculated, and maybe even said by Intel that they're basically not going to have new CPU models out until like December at the earliest. And there's different times for the different releases. So, the MacBook Air super low power CPU might come out at a different time than like the ones the iMac uses and stuff like that. But basically, it's looking unlikely that Apple is going to have a compelling reason to update the current line of anything anytime soon. That doesn't mean they can't launch a new one. Like if they wanted to do a Retina MacBook Air or any new size of a laptop, they could just ship it with the existing CPU family. It wouldn't be that big of a deal.
I don't know about that because I always assumed that Retina would be rating for Broadwell just for power concerns because the extra power needed by the screen.
Is Broadwell a die shrink or a process shrink? I think it is, but I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, it is. It's 14 nanometers, isn't it?
So that does matter.
But so like I would imagine that Apple's roadmap was based on the assumption that they would have Broadwell in time for a mid-year, Retina MacBook Air. With the price drop and the revisions before WWDC, like I said, that could go both ways. It could be like, well, you would want to keep those in the lineup because they're still good computers, but like they revised them. Did you see the Macworld speed tests on them? They're actually slower than the models they replaced in a couple of measures.
Well, that was just because of the SSD. There was a thing that came out that first said, "Oh my God, the SSDs are actually slower," and then a couple days later, it came out that, "Oh well, actually, there's always been variance in which SSD manufacturer you get when you buy your MacBook Air. There's always been variances in them, and there's the current variances are nothing new."
Yeah, that could be true, but you would think that Macworld would get the models with the fast ones, but I don't know. But anyway, the point is they're not, the revisions of the existing models are not like, oh, these are so much faster than last year's. It's just, it's a price drop and performance is the same, maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse, depending on what your previous one and what your current one is. Screens, not a big change there or anything. So it's like that they're being pushed down market and kept on life support to make room for something. And I can't decide whether doing that before WWDC means they're making room for an announcement at WWDC, or doing it before WWDC means this is not, and we don't have anything nice to say, so we won't say anything at all at WWDC, and you'll just all wait, Mac Pro style, for us to come out with the real replacement machines.
I'm guessing it's the latter, just because we know that Intel's having these issues with the new generation of CPUs, so we know that this current generation of MacBook Airs has to last longer than expected.
I would still be excited for Apple to announce the machine, show it, and say it's not shipping until like October, and then in October have it slip to December. Like that would, I want to see what the new machine looks like, even if I can't have it until the end of the year.
So basically, exactly what they did with the Mac Pro last year.
Yeah, exactly. It was, it's like, not that people are dying for new Airs, but by pushing the existing ones down, it's like now the Air feels like kind of a loser machine. It's like we know there's a replacement coming and it's not here yet. So they haven't been waiting years like the Mac Pro people, but still, we'll get to any other hardware we think might be announced, but we all agree probably no phones because they're in September these days. The iPads have just been updated. If they're not going to show a Retina Air, do they have any hardware to announce at WWDC?
Well, there's always room for a new category.
I was just thinking that and just put it in the show notes to talk about. We may do the wearables thing. I want so badly to have a clever idea as to what that would be, but I cannot come up with anything.
We are also sponsored this week by NatureBox. NatureBox delivers delicious and nutritious snacks to your door every month. Go to naturebox.com/ATP and you will get 50% off your first box. These are smarter snacks you can feel good about. They have no high-fructose corn syrup, no partially hydrogenated oils, no trans fats, no artificial sweeteners, no artificial flavors or colors. These are better for you, and they're nutritionist approved. When you sign up, you get a discovery box filled with surprise snacks. Then you have the option to either pick your own, or you can let NatureBox surprise you with new snacks every month. You can browse their site at naturebox.com/ATP to check out their full lineup along with all previous NatureBox deliveries, with nutrition labels and ingredient lists for everything. Each bag includes 3 to 5 servings of its snack, and you can choose from 3 quantities every month. You can get 5 bags for just $19.95, 10 bags for just $29.95, or 20 bags for just $49.95. All of those prices come with free shipping to the continental U.S., and they'll even ship to Alaska or Hawaii for just $2 more. NatureBox is great for the home, office, or on the go. Go to naturebox.com/ATP to get 50% off your first box. Thank you very much to NatureBox once again for sponsoring our show.
So what about Apple TV at WWDC? Either software or hardware?
The hardware is kind of like the iPod Touch hardware at this point. It's like Apple doesn't really... Apple updates it, but is in no real hurry. Like what? They're a single-core A5 in the Apple TV, the current Apple TV, right?
Yeah, the shrunk version.
Like at a certain point, it becomes like USB 1.0, where it's more expensive to put on a computer than 2.0 because everybody's making 2.0 chips. I mean, it's different because only Apple's making the A5, but still, at this point, you feel like Apple must have worked through their inventory of A5s with a bum core.
No, these are now custom chips. Remember, and I think it was an Antec did the teardown where, like, as of like a year and a half ago, they're actually making custom chips that right now are only in the Apple TV. They only have one core to begin with. Apple
TV, it's not slow per se, but it's certainly not a speed demon, and the interface is clunky, and no one's really talking about an Apple television set anymore. We're just assuming they're going to update the puck, but we all think the puck software and experience needs to be updated, and I think part of that updated experience, if they ever bring it, would have to be a faster CPU and maybe some more memory to support what we hope is a better UI than just a massive grid of rounded rectangles that you navigate between and that appear randomly on your thing. So there are an awful lot of sessions on the WWDC schedule that are like to be announced, and those all can't be like, oh, here's the new Xcode or whatever. Like, there's got to be something. I should have done the count. Did anyone do the count of how many are like to be announced this year versus last year?
Well, I remember last year there were a lot that were to be announced that weren't about any kind of like special secret thing. Like, basically what they tend to do is anything that includes in its name or description the name of any unreleased thing or unannounced thing does not get put in the app until keynote day, until after the keynote. And so it's like, it might even be like the title, like a session might be, one of those to be announced titles now, and it might just be like, what's new in networking in iOS 8, and that's just because iOS 8 hasn't been announced yet, so they mark it as secret. So you can't really tell by that.
I suppose, but like, I was trying to look at the categories because the secret ones do have categories applied to them. So you can see one's dev tools, like you look at the day and the time and the fact that it's dev tools. You're like, oh, that's the Xcode 6, session. And like, there's a couple ones like media, like in a prominent slot. What would they have to do about media? It's like some new AV Foundation stuff, and like, I'm
God,
trying
I hope not.
I'm trying to figure out that if they did a big Apple TV revision, say allowing apps of some kind or making an SDK for it or something like that, are there enough slots in prominent positions to do that? I don't know. I mean, the Apple, I didn't put the iPod Touch down here too, but God knows when they're going to update that. But I would like to see a revision of the Apple TV, even if they just do a hardware bump and like a reasonable software revision. Like I said, we've given up for the Apple TV set. You've given up for them fixing TV because, all the rumors are that any TV stuff they have is not this year, probably. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, so what hardware do we get? No hardware in the WWDC announcement?
Which do you think will be updated first? The iPod Classic, the iPod Touch, or the Mac Mini?
I'm going to go with Mac Mini there, I think.
I think it'd be the iPod Touch. That's
a tough race, though. They're both pretty neglected. It's not going to be the iPod Classic, I'll tell you that. I don't think they'll change that until they can't get the parts anymore.
Discontinuing it would count as an update.
In that case, maybe.
I really am having a hard time thinking of someone put a Retina MacBook Pros, and they're not due for an update, but they could be. But then what would you do to them besides reducing the price and maybe offering more RAM or bigger, faster SSDs? Like, if Broadwell's not ready, you're not going to change the CPUs.
Well, and exactly, that's the problem. Like, that's why I don't think we're going to see any new Macs unless they are a new form factor using the old CPUs, because there's nothing new to put in them. Apple does not do major updates to products without a new Intel chipset to put in them. They just don't. They'll do minor stuff and that won't even bother with an announcement, or they'll do a whole new line that doesn't need a new CPU because they can use something that was already available in a new way. But they're not going to release because you're right. Yeah, what would they do? It's like I know they're not going to announce a new Mac Pro already because there's no new Xeon yet. And you can always tell when they're going to announce new Mac Pros. Well, usually you were able to always tell before they went 3 years without doing anything to it by just looking at the Xeon roadmap. Say, all right, well, when are there new Xeons coming out that are the series that the Mac Pro uses? And as soon as there's new Xeons, within a month or two, there's new Mac Pros. Same thing with the laptops. You can see Intel's roadmap, and Intel releases new CPUs about every year, and this year's are delayed. And so therefore, I suspect it's a pretty safe bet that all new Mac launches are going to be delayed until the winter or the spring.
See, this is the perfect time for them to rev the iPod Touch at WWDC. Because like, it's so far behind that it's easy to, like, you put an A6 in it. I'm not asking for an A. I'll put an A7 in it. Who cares? Like this.
Wait, it's still A5?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think it is. I can't even keep track. It's so old. I don't even remember how old it is.
No, it has the tall screen, right? Like the iPhone 5. So it probably has an A6 in it.
Oh, I don't know. Someone look it up. It's super slow compared to the iPhone 5S. I'll tell you that. Yeah, the chat room says A5 still.
Oh, that's terrible.
And not that I think they're going to do this, but like, it's the one product that they have that they could easily provide an update to if they cared, but they don't. So whatever. But,
well, and they hardly sell any of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not going to happen. But if they were desperate for some hardware, that would be a gimme.
You're keeping the entire line afloat. You're the only one buying it.
No, lots of children.
Hey, I just bought another one. Like, I couldn't believe I did this because, like, it's against my religion to buy an Apple device this old. Like I bought one for my son because he wanted one for his birthday, and so now he's got one. He's like, it's the worst time to buy this thing, but kids like them. My daughter's upset that she doesn't have one, so now she wants one. So I'm trying to resist buying a second one or a third one. I don't know how many. We got a lot of iPod Touches in this house.
Just get the new iPhone this fall and give her your current one. Done.
Yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see what the new iPhone looks like. If it's a big, giant 5.5 inch thing, I don't know.
It's going to look like an iPhone. What do you mean?
It's going to look like it's going to look like an iPad Mini, if the rumors are to be believed.
Yeah, and maybe the big one does. You know, maybe the quote iPhone Air, that the big 5.5 inch one. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
All right, so hardware. It seems like we don't know what the heck is going on here with hardware. We can't. None of us can think of anything that we think is a slam dunk for hardware at WWDC.
If they're going to do another MacBook Air, I bet they will do it here. Like, if they're going to do a 12-inch something, this would be a good time to do it because they have no other good existing product updates. But really, I think the most obvious answer is if they're going to announce any hardware at all, which is not a given, but if they're going to announce any hardware at all, it's probably going to be some new category. So, and you know, not just Retina Mac, but you know, something like a watch, sensor, earbud, pinky ring, whatever. You know, some kind of new thing. Because this is a really good time to do that. If they're announcing, and it could even just be Apple TV, you know, 10.0 or whatever, where Apple TV is now a full-fledged platform that you can write apps for, or something like that. You know, that could be the big thing this year. And some of those sessions that we don't know anything about that have to do with media could be Apple TV development.
That's true.
I haven't been following the rumors that closely, but hasn't the consensus been that Apple wearable, sensor support and stuff would come in iOS 6, but Apple supporting hardware would only come later in the year? I haven't been keeping up.
You mean 8, but yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, it wouldn't be unprecedented for them to have WWDC not mention anything and then announce new hardware in the fall that has some new feature and then like spring on developers with like a 0.1 update or the very last beta SDK or something like that. Like that, they have done that before. In fact, they did it with the M7. The M7 chip in the iPhone 5S, they did that whole thing. But something that's actually like a big deal, like a whole new sensor type. I mean, that would be tough. And if they're going to show off HealthBook, you know, maybe they might pre-announce something involving that because it's kind of, you know, HealthBook as we know it right now with the sensors that we know about now is pretty much just pedometer plus. But if they're going to do new sensors, then they become more valuable. So I don't know. I'm guessing that we see some new category be announced at WWDC, and I don't know what that category will be. Whether it's Apple TV major update that's now developable, or whether it's a wristband watch thing. Who knows? I bet it's going to be something like that. There's something that we have not been able to develop for or use before that we can now develop for or use.
I suppose. Do you think it's about time for the Apple TV to get a visual refresh? The software, not the hardware.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. That's stop being a stupid grid of rounded rectangles and start having a richer interface.
Oh, and I'm thinking it's so dark now, and iOS 7 is so bright. I almost wonder if just making it brighter and more iOS 7-like would be an improvement. And additionally, isn't it running not a fork, but kind of a fork of iOS? Isn't that right? So
yeah, I mean, it definitely does not. It looks dated, no question. It looks dated. I don't think the interface is scaling very well. Like as they keep adding more and more of these channels, and the rounded oval keeps getting, the list of those keeps getting longer and longer and longer. It definitely is not scaling well.
I mean, if you just look at Roku and Amazon's Fire TV thing, like for where Apple TV, like what its competition is currently doing, and Apple is still pretty far behind that. Although as a Plasma TV owner, I hope Apple does not go the iOS 7 route and make it all white. And anyone who owns a Plasma TV knows why.
Fair enough.
Wait, hold on. Why? Is that because it makes it hotter, or?
Yeah, white screens use more power draw, causes the transformer buzz to be louder, and yes, all the lovely sacrifices that I make, including having fans in my television to get superior picture quality. And one of them is if you make the screen all white, you get a more audible transformer buzz. So having a black background is preferable to me.
Our final sponsor this week is lynda.com, lynda.com/ATP. Lynda.com helps you keep up to date with your software, pick up brand new skills, or explore new hobbies with easy-to-follow video tutorials. And these are, trust me, these are really, really well made. I've learned a lot from these, just with things like audio editing and new platform stuff. It's really, really great. Lynda has over 2,400 courses taught by industry experts, with more added every week. They even work with software companies to provide you with updated training the same day new versions hit the market, so you're always up to speed. So, for instance, if there's like a new version of Photoshop or Microsoft Office or something, they will often have a new version of their tutorial ready to go when it's released, so that way you can pick it up immediately. They have courses for all experience levels, whether you're a beginner or advanced. All this is available for one low monthly price of just $25, and that will give you unlimited access to the entire Lynda.com library. So they have things like applications, as I said earlier. You can learn Photoshop, Excel, Illustrator, and you can even produce media like Logic and Final Cut, all this crazy stuff. You can even learn programming languages like PHP if you want to be like me and be an idiot, or if you want to learn something better like Node, you can learn that. You can even learn Perl. I won't comment on what that will make you, but you can learn Perl if you'd like. Lynda.com even has courses on branding. Learn how to manage the way you're perceived, online and off, with personal branding strategies. You can also bring your iOS development skills up to speed. Every time they release a new SDK, Lynda.com has videos out there for that. So this fall, they're going to do an iOS 8 video. They already have an iOS 7 video. You can even explore ASP.NET. If you really want to have a job where you can park right in front of your office and have no walking involved at all. So improve your skills, keep up with technology, and learn new applications. These are great produced videos. This is not like the stuff you see on YouTube. This is produced by professionals. They have these awesome transcripts on the side. You can click around in the transcript and it seeks around in the video. You can watch them on your iPhone or iPad. Really, really great stuff. Go to lynda.com/ATP. That's LYNDA.com/ATP to get a free 7-day trial. Thanks a lot to Lynda for sponsoring once again.
I'm going to choose to believe that they deliberately put that branding stuff in the ad read because they knew that you would be the one reading it.
Global branding strategies.
Oh, right. Anyway, anything else on wearables?
Yeah, we've had it in the show notes for a while. I mean, like to Craig Hockenberry's thing about Apple wearables, and I've been thinking about it as well. And my thinking on wearables has changed over time. Over time of Apple doing nothing, and the more I think about wearables, I keep seeing. Everyone keeps seeing in their head like something that goes around your wrist that has this amazing futuristic looking screen on it that does something, or that you interact with by swiping, or I don't know, like it's just like you see these mock-ups and they look really cool, but it's like, well, then how would you use it? And everything we're seeing from actual rumors from Apple are like the health book stuff, and that's all about having an application on your phone that integrates information from other sensors. So when I think of Apple wearables now, I keep thinking of things that either don't have screens or have things that are like barely screens. I mean, like the Fitbits have their various little displays with the LEDs and stuff, because screens are a problem. Like, you can't have a screen on all that. There's a reason all these Fitbit and things like that don't have big LCD screens in them. You can't have a screen on all the time. The battery will run out. I mean, you don't have your phone screen on all the time. You just take it out, you look at the screen, you put it away, you turn the screen off. But if the screen's not on all the time, it can't really function as a watch because you got to do, think of all the smart watches that make you do the little jiggle shake to turn on or tap it to turn on, or, and I'm thinking, like, what does Apple want out of this? They want more sensors and more information integrated into your phone. Does that require a screen that's always on, or a screen at all? Not that I'm saying that Apple Wearable won't have a screen, but I think there's a place in our current conception with the known information of what Apple's trying to do with sensors and integration for a thing that you attach to your person or clothing somewhere that doesn't need to have a screen. And it could be that they also have a device that has a screen, but everything I'm seeing out of Apple makes me think some little turdy thing that will look nice but doesn't need to have a screen. Does that mean it's a ring like Hockenberry's thing? No, I think that's still a fantasy. I can't imagine them pulling that off, although feel free to prove me wrong, Apple. Does it mean it couldn't be around your wrist? Maybe it could. Maybe it could have they're going to use some breakthrough screen technology that can be on all the time, or maybe they're going to use color e-ink, or there's all sorts of crazy things you can come up with. And certainly a lot of the rumors from years ago were like, Apple's investigating curved, flexible screen technology for things that'll go around your wrist and you can still touch them and stuff like that. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that the vibe I've been getting from the information available is that there is a place in Apple's grand conception of health monitoring and health book and stuff like that for something that doesn't necessarily have to have something that we would recognize as a screen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if Apple does do some sort of wearable thing, I am pretty convinced it will not have a screen. And additionally, I think it will have some sort of sensor, almost certainly health related, that the iPhone either can't or doesn't or perhaps won't have. I don't know what that would be. Like Pulse would be a great example if you could do it comfortably, but I can't imagine how that would work unless you could, grab whatever latent electricity you have in your like wrist or finger or whatever. But I see it personally, as whatever their wearable is as a mechanism to sell more phones because, hey, look at all this wonderful health or perhaps other kind of data you can get into the phone if you have the Apple iRing. And I'm not sure it's going to be a ring, obviously, but just for the sake of conversation. So I agree with you, John. I'm pretty convinced it will not have a screen and will be all about sensors.
Yeah, and the sensor stuff, like, I don't know a lot about medical sensors, but, like, talking about being able to track O2 levels, don't those things use some kind of light? They shine through your fingertips and stuff and see how red things are? I have no idea how these things work. But, like, when I think of stuff like that, I think of, like, well, the iPhone 6 could have, the Touch ID sensor or someplace that you put your hand, but you're not going to have something clipped to your fingertip when you go through the day. And you can't clip something to your the end of your shirt or your bra or something and have that measuring your O2 level. So like, I don't even understand which parts of the body you need to clip things to get this information, or if it's going to be like a once or twice a day, put your finger on this special spot on your iPhone 6 type of thing. So, I mean, Apple has been hiring these people for visualizations of medical information. Remember those hires back then of like there's so much smoke there, and I just don't understand what form the fire is going to take.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it is the home button, because that's something that you like. If you think about all the different places you could have a wearable, you have like, wristbands, but that could be on the outside of a shirt. Like if you have like a long sleeve shirt, the wristband could be on the outside of it. And, maybe not always, but it might be. You can't really count on that. Rings, I think you're right. I think we're probably not there technically yet to be able to fit everything in something as small as a ring. But the home button, you're always pushing with your finger throughout the day. And so that actually makes a lot of sense.
The wrist thing, for even stuff like Pulse, you would never want a wrist thing that was tight enough on your wrist to measure your pulse. Like, people don't like things gripping them that tightly. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like you'd be in a blood pressure cuff all day, but it's like, even just to pick up your pulse, I feel like you'd have to have something that is slightly uncomfortable. And there's a reason that people don't walk around with these sensors on them all day. Like, we go into the doctor's office and they hook these things up to you, and you want to get them off, So I mean, I don't know. Like, and the thing about wearables is like, we're so much focused on health because that's the little nugget of information that we have from like vague screenshot rumor site type things of Health Book. And it's like, well, what good you brought this up before, what good is Health Book? How is that any different than Pedometer plus unless you have some other information? And where's that information coming from? And that's why we get into like that's a third party opportunity. Apple will basically make these APIs, and Fitbit and whoever can make new devices that will feed into this API. But then then where is Apple in this? Where is the new category? That's the question we continue asking. And I guess we'll keep asking. If this year ends and there's nothing that you can wear from Apple, and they haven't done anything to Apple TV, like, something is wrong, because, Tim said, man, new category this year.
I think you're right also that, going back a step, with the whole screen, no screen thing, like whatever this thing is, I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it every episode. I would never bet against the smartphone, at least not for a long time. In the current era that we are in, the smartphone is king. Smartphones are awesome, and it is so unwise to bet against them. As a tangent to that, if you're thinking about having something that you're also going to be carrying around, it makes so much more sense for it to be a smartphone accessory than its own standalone thing of some sort. And the smartphone has all the power. It has all the connectivity. It has way more battery power than you can fit in a, quote, wearable, unless the wearable is a backpack. And so it is unwise to try to cram a whole bunch of power-sucking stuff into a wearable, including a screen. And yeah, you could do like e-ink, so it only takes power to change the contents of the screen. You could do that, but e-ink looks like crap, and I can't see Apple doing that.
You can't touch that. Like,
can't touch this.
Well, no, you could, but it just takes more power. Yeah.
It wouldn't respond to your touch in real time. Like, that's the whole point of touch, is like that you feel like you're directly manipulating something. And all the mock-ups are like some big curved glass screen that looks like you're wearing like the bracelet equivalent of Cinderella's glass slippers, right? Which you would not want to have. Let me just make something that's like solid glass, put it on my wrist so I can bang my wrist on the table and have shards of glass drive. Anyway, that's what the and then, but what would you do with that? Can you imagine trying to swipe a smooth glass? Like, half the time you'd end up rotating it around your wrist. And where are you swiping anyway? Are you swiping longitudinally or like across it? And like, how could you use an interface? Like, if you've tried to use any of the recent iPod Nanos where they have touch screens in a tiny little space, there's not much that you can do reasonably with a screen that size.
Yeah, and if you look at smartwatches that exist today, that from other people, in order to have any kind of interactivity on a smartwatch, it has to be pretty big and bulky, and that's not cool. It's not sexy. It is not appealing. It is a wearable, certainly, but it's a wearable that nobody wants to wear. And if Apple, like, and these things that are catching on big time, things like Fuel Bands and Fitbits, they're smaller, they're subtle. You don't have to like take them out constantly. You can leave them tucked under your sleeve or clipped to your bra or in your pants pocket or something. You can leave them hidden away because like wearing electronics is just not cool.
What they start looking like is, I guess, they start with Lance Armstrong, maybe breast cancer, like all those things that people would wear as showing their support for some cause, or like those little color, like the Fuel Bands look so much like the whatever, Lance Armstrong bracelet things, or the breast cancer awareness pink things, like, and we've just sort of accepted that you'll have a regular outfit and then there'll be this other thing that you wear that doesn't call attention to itself and that you don't spend much time interacting with. And those were totally non-functional. They were just pieces of rubber that had words stamped into them. They
increased awareness, John.
Yeah, right. And now we have one that at least has stuff inside it that at the end of the day I get to count my steps or whatever. And, I just, again, we should get someone here with a medical sensing expert to say, because they could probably tell us exactly, look, if you want, pulse, this is the only places you can get it, and this is how. If you want, blood oxygenation, this is the only places you can get it, and this is how. Because these answers are all out there. We just don't happen to know them.
All right, so let's talk about OS 10, 10.10. 10.
La OSS, Ferrari La Ferrari.
Yeah, I feel like Super Troopers with the Meow game. Anyway, so I think we can round up our show with iOS 8, but let's start with OS 10. God, I'm already stumbling. OS 10, 10.10. What do we expect? To me, I expect some sort of visual refresh. I don't think it'll be full bore iOS 7, but I think it'll be somewhere in that direction.
I expect it's gonna have another name of a place I haven't heard of that's awkwardly pluralized.
I don't think it'll be awkwardly pluralized, but I do think that it will have...
Maybe it will end with like ED or ING.
I'm going to go on record and say it will be a place that we recognize, even as...
Wheeling.
Even as non-Californians, in a place where we aren't on vacation all the time.
As much as I was rooting for the cat names to end, now that they have, I realized that with their new theme, it's basically impossible to try to guess. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain number of big cats, and they started to work their way through them, so it became a fun game to guess what the next one would be. But there's a lot of cities in California, so forget about that. A lot of places in California. And yeah, there are the prominent ones we can all think of, Yosemite, San Francisco, whatever. But like, considering they started with Mavericks, it seems like they're going obscure.
I agree. The other thing, this is very minor, but I really, really want, and I believe this is a combination of iOS 8 and OS 10, I really want AirDrop between my iDevices and my computer. Can we have that, please?
Yeah, I'm still emailing pictures to myself because it's faster than everything else.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
I still email so much crap to myself. It's really embarrassing.
Yeah, I'd really like that, and I'd like a mail app that works properly. Although I like AirMail quite a bit, but I'd like the standard out-of-the-box mail app to work again.
Yeah, thinking about 10.10, besides the visual refresh, which I think is enough to, that will obviously be like the headliner feature of this release, is like, now we finally have time to revise how things look, and we'll all either love it or complain about it, or depending what they do. But that's not, that's a big change, and it could affect applications in profound ways. But in terms of like the underpinnings, that's not a big, like, I don't think they're doing anything to underpinnings to enable this new look or anything. So then, like, what is this OS about? Is it just a visual refresh? What features, what needs to be done to the Core OS, and what could be done? Will they continue to just, I mean, I'm sure they'll make things better in little bits, but like last year, the big theme was power saving, and they had lots of technology to support that. This year, the big theme will be visual refresh, but there's no technology to support that, really. I mean, obviously, new file system is evergreen, and they can bring that out anytime they want, but I have no expectations. Everything else about the OS, like, you can point to individual parts of the OS that can be tightened up and made better, but Mavericks, with the exception of the applications, because if you use the Apple Mail, I feel sorry for you, but even before, I haven't been a fan of that app for a long time, but that makes you think Mavericks was a terrible release. But in terms of the Core OS, very, very few problems. I upgraded Mavericks everywhere really early, and there just have not been a lot of weird things, not even like weird application compatibility things. And we're only on 0.3. We went 1, 2, and 3 since last year.
Yeah, I would say overall, with the exception of my clock always being fast, which I think 10.9.3 might have fixed. It's really solid. I mean, I've always wondered. Well, not always. I've wondered recently if it will ever be worth it for them to modernize AppKit and maybe not replace it with UIKit, but bring a lot of the UIKit lessons back into AppKit. Because right now, if you want to write a GUI app for iOS and Mac, there's very little GUI code you can share because AppKit just works very, very differently than UIKit. It has a lot of legacy baggage, and I don't know enough about it to really talk that much more about it besides this very high-level overview, but I've often wished, like, I know how to develop for iOS pretty well now. I know UIKit really well. I don't know anything about AppKit. I just know it's very different, and there's a lot of things that don't work the same way and aren't as nice or aren't as simple. And so I would love it if they would bring a lot of UIKit, the parts that make sense. Obviously, certain things aren't going to make sense outside of like the full screen touch environment, but bring over the parts that make sense with things like how views are dealt with, all the layer backed stuff that you can do all that in AppKit, but it's, oftentimes it's like, it's not the default, or it's hard, or it's different, or it's somehow tricky. If they would bring some of that development framework, and when you're doing a major visual refresh, that would be a pretty good time to do it, I think. That would go a long way. Unfortunately, I think that's very unrealistic because it just seems like they're stretched so thin, and the Mac is not that high of a priority that would justify all those development resources if they're also having to work on iOS 8, iPad version of it, which is still terrible, plus whatever else engineering resources are being devoted to for things like new categories, whether it's Apple TV or something. We know from hints and bits and pieces here and there, we know that a lot of people at Apple are working on something secret that is relatively new or relatively recent, but we still don't know what that is. So, like, there's something else draining engineering resources at Apple.
Yeah, I hate that phenomenon. Like, that, as far as we can tell from the outside, that this happens inside Apple, that something big, new, and important comes, and that team, harvests the best engineers from other teams, leaving them sort of with, I guess, the lesser people or the people who didn't want to move. And those people go off and disappear for a while and work on some new thing. It's like, that's fun and makes for good articles after the fact, but it's kind of like, what if I like the products that those guys used to be working on? Now they're just going to get fewer resources. But I mean, I think you're right about, like, the main thing preventing, like, the reason we don't have parity, like, Microsoft's been leaning on this recently, like, hey, you can write a GUI app and you can run it in Windows 8 and you can run it on tablets and you can run it on phones, and it's like the same app with, minor changes or whatever. And Apple doesn't have that. And I think it's mostly just because the Mac's not that big a platform compared to iOS. Like, that's always going to be the thing when you're trying to prioritize resources. Well, how many iPhones did we sell last year and how many Macs? It's like, and they are modernizing AppKit. Like, didn't they make a new table system that doesn't use NSL a couple of years back? I mean, whatever. It's not the same as, like, so here you go, here's UIKit on the Mac, but the worst warts get covered over. But, like, it's just the people who are left there working on AppKit who are doing that, and they don't have resources. The iOS 8 team is obviously much bigger. I mean, you're right. As part of a visual refresh, if the visual refresh includes, like, especially if it looks a lot like iOS 7, or the visual refresh relies more on layer back controls, maybe it's a time to revise a few more APIs here and there. But I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking of CoreOS features unless you're thinking of something. I mean, not that I think it doesn't need them. I'm trying to think of features that Apple would put the resources towards, like the kernel and the CoreOS. Like they could do lots of interesting things there, but what's their motivation for that, right? I guess their motivation would be we want to do this because it will benefit. The CoreOS stuff benefits iOS and OS X. So if they change the kernel, the Mac would just reap that benefit as a side effect of doing that. But
right, like kernel stuff is, and CoreOS and shared frameworks, things like, from things like Core Animation all the way down to newer stuff like, Grand Central Dispatch and auto layout, like all these major advances that come to both platforms because they're lower level, that will continue. That'll be fine. But it's the high level UI stuff that is so radically different between the two platforms. And obviously, as I said, to some degree it should be because they're two different interaction paradigms, but there's a lot of stuff that could be shared that isn't, only because of legacy concerns, it seems. But I think you're right. I think it will never be worth it to Apple to invest their engineering resources, which are very limited and strained, which I think is a big problem, but to invest their limited and strained engineering resources into this platform that is such a small part of their business these days. Which is, again, I think it's a shame, and I think that's wrong. I think that's bad prioritization, but that's probably what they're going to do, because we see that as much as we want Apple to have more resources, for whatever reason, they just keep not having them. And they just seem to have a very small pool of engineering ability that they selectively choose. That's why some of the applications, like people in the chat were talking about how long it's been since Aperture's been updated, which, and Aperture has Aperture has always been dysfunctional in this regard, but like it just seems like things that are not the new hotness at Apple just get ignored for years, with nothing being done to them for years, because there's nobody working on them, or there's like one person responsible for maintaining it, while the rest of the team was sent off to do something newer and more exciting. That's some new product, or that's going to get them in the news again. And it's a shame, because there's a lot of Apple stuff that really could use some attention and some love. And like what happened with iWork having gone so long with no update, and then what feels like a pretty rushed update that happened kind of last fall that kind of messed everything up. This happens all over across Apple's entire product line. Both hardware and software, but especially in software. And you can just tell, like, there's so much stuff in software where it just seems like no one's working on it. And that's probably the case, because Apple's teams are kept pretty small.
Yeah, on the file system front, the only hope I have, because the file system is the type of thing, I mean, they could have been working on it for years without me hearing about it, I suppose. But a file system is something I don't think you can develop between two major releases. Like, it's a multi-year project. You have to be super careful. You have to maintain all your semantics, and presumably you're adding value, so there'd be new features to deal with as well. And yes, Apple desperately needs a new file system, but they don't seem to be working on one as far as I'm aware. But they do have core storage, and as I pointed out in my past OS X reviews, a lot of the things that core storage already does on Macs today are very similar to the things that a file system would need to do. And so it's possible that what they've done for core storage can slowly continue to evolve its way towards a system whereby the disk appears to be HFS plus, but most of the actual management of blocks on disk and APIs and everything, like, it ends up being core storage with a thin veneer of HFS plus over it. Which is kind of, I mean, if you use core storage now, that's not I don't know. I don't know how they can manage the layering between those things, because, like I said, core storage keeps track of where things are on disk and manages blocks and does all these interesting things, and is actually one of the more interesting modern file system type things that Apple has done in recent years to enable things like the new File Vault, which is so much better than the old one. But there's HFS Plus still sitting there, still having crappy features, still corrupting itself, still being its own, still being single threaded, still being its own cranky self. And so HFS Plus is on iOS devices too. I'm always talking about this in the context of the Mac, but all your iPhones are running HFS Plus as well. I think they actually
just restore your phone and quit all your apps.
Did they run the case sensitive version of it? I forget if they still did that, or if they ever did that. But anyway, a new file system, or a lack of a file system, or like native core storage against NAND or something, that would benefit iOS devices. And so I think that's got to happen eventually, because that's Apple's bread and butter, right? It's not like, oh, this is just a Mac thing, it's never going to happen. No, it's an entire Apple platform thing. Everything uses HFS Plus. And there's performance to be had, there are features to be added, and there's reliability to be improved. Every axis along, Apple can improve in this regard. And none of them, I guess Apple doesn't think any of them are critical. Well, it could be more reliable, but it's reliable enough. Well, it could have better performance, but the performance is good enough. Well, we could have more features, but the features we have are good enough. I can keep saying that, but eventually it's going to not be true. And I hope they don't, this is not like a new language, an API thing where they have to start 20 years ahead of time, but this is like a 3-year project, easy.
I mean, we'll see what happens. There's going to have to be a time where the file system changes. And I'm a little scared that if the file system does change, that you'll just quit this podcast because you'll have no reason to complain about it anymore.
That seems unlikely.
Yeah, I know. Anything else on the new Mavericks that won't be called Mavericks?
I'm really curious to just see what they do with it. I mean, besides visual refresh, OS X is it's pretty mature at this point. The releases add less and less generally over time. If only there was somebody we could ask to verify that. But it seems like obviously it's a mature product. The gains to be had are smaller and smaller in each release, especially by speeding up to releases happening every year as opposed to before where it was like every 18 to 24 months.
Well, they still keep doing that's the thing though with the yearly releases. They still keep doing stuff to the internals that I think I would never want to risk in a yearly release. Like if you look at that's why I'm so surprised the Mavericks has done so well. Like if you look at what they did with the power saving stuff and the new APIs, they're always monkeying with even if it's just screwing with LaunchD again, or they're adding minor features and doing minor tweaks and minor improvements, but they're to parts of the system that if you screw up in any way, nothing works. And so even though they're not big changes, every year they do that. They did it in Snow Leopard too. No new features, but they screw with everything in there. I mean, it's good. I think the CoreOS team does a great job with that. They're like, you know what? LaunchD's there and it works, but it could be better. And let's add these features and tighten this up and make it use less memory and do this. And it's those features, all the way down to the kernel, if you mess up even the littlest bit of that, it destroys the stability and reliability of the entire OS. And Mavericks, I think they did a good job. They screwed up the applications. Mail and Gmail got all screwed up. But that's I think end users are more concerned about that. They're oh, Maverick sucks because my mail broke. And I understand that perspective. But from my perspective, I think of the OS as the core OS. And they continue to bravely make changes to the core OS on a yearly schedule in areas that are super risky and manage to not screw it up.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was actually surprised, with all the Mavericks kernel changes, changing kernel timings of things, that sounds like a pretty risky thing to do. But they did it, and it seemed like it was flawless. I mean, it seemed like it caused no noticeable problems. It was really quite solid.
Or even your bad clock, they screwed with NTPD, they screwed with how they do time or whatever. That's the type of thing where why did they change it? Was it broken before? Well, no, but someone said they could do it. Got a lot of it in terms of energy saving. Let's do it so we can, if we're doing things repeatedly, they had all this new instrumentation to see who's waking up the CPU and stuff, and oh, this stupid thing's waking up the CPU, and so they changed it, and that's an example of where they screwed it up and had bugs in it or whatever. But everything's up for grabs. If you run PS and see all those bazillion processes, those are all things that they continue to improve. And one of the good ones is I haven't seen the stupid blurry icon bug that has been haunting OS X for years and years. Did you guys get this one? Where all of a sudden your dock icons will look like they're half res and be all pixelated and zoomed up?
I've never seen that.
I would occasionally get that with just one app would be half res, and the next time I'd launch it, it would update it and be correct.
Yeah, sometimes, but it would spread like a virus. You'd open a window and they'd all be, but some of them we messed up and some of them be good. That bug was in the OS for so long, and from people I talked to at Apple, oh, Mavericks will actually fix that. And fingers crossed, since upgrading to Mavericks, I have not seen that bug yet, and so that makes me happy because someone, the icon services thing, or, it's like when they update the font daemon or whatever, there's tons of processes there and they keep improving them. And I like that. I just get a little bit nervous about it on a yearly schedule.
One thing that struck me as a little weird is we haven't heard very much chatter about OS 10.10. There's been a lot of talk about HealthBook, about all the other things that may be coming in iOS. And I know that iOS is the darling of everyone's eye at the moment, but there's been very little talk that I've heard about 10.10. And that's a little scary if there's not much happening, but kind of awesome if they really finally did double down on secrecy. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, all the things we listed would be big. Visual refresh is going to be big. That's what everyone's going to write about, right? UIKit coming to the Mac, would be big. That would be a headliner feature. Hey, all you iOS developers, now suddenly you have an easy way to make a Mac app, and we want to encourage you to do that because, the halo effect to get the Mac more popular, right? New file system, core storage stuff would be big among nerds. Like there's plenty of areas that they could put on there that they could put those bullet points on the website, and everyone would be like, wow, Mac OS X Sausalito is great. Is that a city in California? I don't even know.
I believe it is. So to that end, before we start the iOS 8 talk, while you guys were going back and forth for a few minutes, and John, you were making a couple of really brilliant points before I had the chance to make them, and so I could have sounded brilliant, damn it. But I was looking at the schedule for WWDC, and I was digging through it and looking at the amount or the categories that each of these sessions are part of. Because if you look at the schedule, even the ones that are TBA, to be announced, they still have the category listed. So I looked, and by quick count, as I'm still trying to pay attention to what you guys are saying, there are 35 frameworks sessions, 17 media session, and 19 tools sessions. Additionally, I thought, well, let me look at what's in Presidio, which, if you don't know, is the biggest room within Moscone, the way Apple sets it up. And so really important things that are going to be really, really popular for everyone to hear tend to be in Presidio. For example, the keynote. So I recounted, and among the things that are not yet announced, so the things that are still to be announced, there are 6 framework sessions in Presidio and 8 media sessions in Presidio. And I didn't look at tools, crap. But I think there are 8 tool sessions in Presidio. I did not look to see if any of them were to be announced. But that's actually, it looks like at least half of them are to be announced. Almost all of them, all the tools ones. That's a lot of tools and a lot of media and a lot of framework stuff all to be announced and all in Presidio. And it makes me wonder, is something big going on that we just don't realize, more than just a visual refresh?
What is the media category? Look at the announced ones in the media category. What the hell is the media category?
Probably too long to do live, but we could like look at last year's where there's nothing to be announced. We know everything last year because a lot of the sessions get repeated, or at least something similar will get repeated. Every year there's going to be stuff about UI, networking, accessibility, working with media, working with Safari and web technologies. Like, there's certain sessions that just get repeated every year. And so we can kind of look at that to maybe eliminate some stuff. But it certainly does sound like media is being emphasized here.
Oh, hold on. I got that backwards. I'm sorry. There are 8 tool sessions that are unannounced in Presidio. I got my wires a little crossed. So there are definitely some media ones as well. But it was tools that I should have said instead of media. I apologize. So there are 6 new framework sessions in Presidio, and I believe there are 8 new media sessions in Presidio. Something along those lines. So no matter how God darn it, I said media again. Tools sessions. I'll get this right one day. So it's now that I've just completely confused everyone, including myself. Suffice to say, there's a lot of tools and a lot of frameworks action going on. And to me, that's indicative of something major and something big. And something we're not thinking of.
No, then it also could be like Marco said, that every one of those descriptions says, find out how to use the new blah with iOS 8 and OS 10 Irvine.
Right. Like I wouldn't read too much into anything regarding the sessions at the conference, because it is like, it's so arbitrary. The categories are so large. Like it isn't like the category is like OpenGL. Like it isn't that specific. It's, media technologies or something, or like they're so broad, and we're not dealing with a massive data set here. We're dealing with, how many sessions are there? Like 60 or something, or 100. Like there aren't that many. It isn't that big of a set, and it's just, there's not that much signal to the noise here.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that when you do a visual refresh, like they did with iOS 7, think of all the sessions that were about like how to make your app not look like ass in iOS 7. Like it was, how to get your views out from under the status bar, Casey. You can go to that session this year. How to use the tint color and all. Like there was tons of sessions, because it's like from the outside, it's like, oh, everything looks different. But from a developer, it's like, oh, how am I gonna, if I have custom controls, how are we gonna make them look nice? Is there a new way to do these controls? How do I deal with text size changing? Like any kind of visual refresh has tons of sessions for the nitty gritty of like developers to figure out how to make their apps look and work right. So if OS X is getting a big visual refresh, I would wager that, well, I don't know these days actually, but I was going to say that does OS 10 have more custom controls than iOS? Maybe, I don't know. Like,
it has a lot more controls total for the whole set, like built-in controls.
Like people with it drawing their own things, where I don't know. I mean, some people aren't even using native controls at all. Like they're drawing their own UI entirely themselves, so that's not a big deal. But like, I can imagine a lot of the bulk. It was we basically know that OS 10 visual refresh is coming. A lot of the sessions are about how to make your app look right in this new look.
Right, and Apple's design principles in this new look, because it isn't just going to be here's a new skin. It's like last year, it's like, all right, well here's a new look, but we also want you to think about this, and this, and it's actually like a rethinking and a redesign rather than just a reskin.
Although there's still that baffling session from last year. iOS 7 is introduced, and there's a whole session about how to make your icons, and all the example icons were like super skeuomorphic, like things look like they were made out of yarn with grass growing on it. Yeah,
it was weird. They actually even said at the beginning, like, keep making your icons the old way. Don't use the new style that we're using, which was really weird. I remember I was in there and I remember thinking that was a very strange thing to say.
And that's what I think of, like the Icon Factory. Craig was putting up like samples of the Xscope, like experimentations and speculative sort of experimentations of how might the Xscope icon look like in a flatter OS 10 world. And they did 2 little samples of them. They look really good, but what is the message going to be from Apple? Is it going to be, are all the OS 10 icons going to be redesigned to be iOS 7 style or whatever the new look, but then they're going to tell us to make our icons the same? I don't know. Anyway, the visual changes cause lots of churn and lots of things that developers have to deal with. So that covers at least a lot of the OS 10 side of things. We should get to iOS 8, though, because iOS 8 will probably not be a visual overhaul, and yet I'm sure there will be lots of sessions about iOS 8.
All right, so what's coming in iOS 8? So I really want, and I'm not going to get it, but I really want some sort of inter-app communication, because as I think John said last episode, if you fix inter-app communication, then you don't need panes of apps running simultaneously on the iPad. Like, so much gets fixed with better inter-app communication, but I'm not hopeful that it's going to happen.
Well, aren't they going to do the remote view controller stuff that's private?
One would think.
They have that. We don't know if they're going to do anything with it. I mean,
right. Well, they make it public. That's the usual MO. It's like it's private for a while, then they get the kinks worked out and they make it public. Or do you still think it's going to stay private?
Well, I think it will stay an implementation detail of the system they actually make public if they do something like this. Because you can't, like, what are you going to do? You can't launch your own process
yeah, exactly.
On iOS like that. You can't do that. So I would love to see them fix, not necessarily what a lot of people would consider inter-app communication. I mean, inter-app communication is kind of a broad topic. There's a lot involved there. They can address a nice chunk of it by doing something like the Windows 8 contracts or the Android intents, or whether I have that backwards, I don't know. But
no, you had that right.
Okay. Something like that, one of those systems where, apps can register and say, I can provide photos to anything that offers a photo picker, or somebody else can say, I'm a search provider, I can search for things, or I accept photos, or I accept URLs, and then be integrated into any kind of share sheet that comes up in other apps. That's the kind of thing I want, because that doesn't require, there was something, I think it was on Gruber's site, something in the last couple of days where somebody was saying, the problem is if you add something like the side-by-side thing that was rumored last week, if you add something like that, you're also adding complexity. And if you do something like the contract and intent systems, you're adding a lot of power without adding a whole lot of user complexity. And there are certainly challenges to those systems, things that you'll have to control and possible problems that could come up. There's a lot of weird, things with fraud and confusion that Apple would have to look for at App Review, but they can do that. They have all the tools in place to do that already. They're set up for that. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be a big problem. I would just love to see them address that, even if all they do is rip off what Windows Phone or Android does, or take bits and pieces from both. That would be amazing. That would be so much better than what we have now, and that would enable so many third-party app capabilities that either weren't possible before or were really clunky and rare before. Right now in Overcast, I have a thing where if you tap a URL, what do you do with it? And I have an open in Safari activity. I have an open in Chrome activity only because I wrote an open in Chrome activity. What if it would be better if Chrome could just say, I can accept URLs from anything that shares URLs. And then I bring up the sheet and I give it a URL, and it shows me a Chrome button. They already have most of the pieces in place to do that already. Like that's been there since iOS 6 with the whole UI activity system. Like it's almost all there already. And the impression I got when poking around back when iOS 6 was released 2 years ago, the impression I got, hint from people, is that kind of system was discussed or in progress and was canceled or was delayed. And so obviously, and you can look at the UI activity system and you can see like, okay, this is obviously intended for something like this. And the support for things like remote view controllers, like the pieces are all there. It's just a matter of, doing a little bit more to expose it as an API. And certainly there's challenges. There's like, there's a pretty big tools challenge and code design structure challenge with like, all right, well, if I offer a remote view controller, how do you present that to the user? Do you launch my entire app in the background and then have me bring up a certain view controller? Like, how does that work? How does that work with memory and the API level and backgrounding? Like, there are certainly some things to consider, but it seems like they've already done most of the work for that. And that, it is certainly a limited form of inter-app communication, but it's a massive step forward from what we have now, and it would really be very beneficial.
Yeah, I'm seeing iOS 8 as kind of the Mavericks of iOS in that from a user's perspective, it's going to seem like iOS 7.5. It's not going to look all that different, and a lot of the new features are going to be internal. So while Mavericks is vaguely visually distinguishable from Mountain Lion, from a user's perspective, it wasn't that big a deal, but there were a lot of changes under the hood. And iOS 8, I would imagine, is going to be the same thing. Refinement of the look, features that probably aren't in the user's face, but that will slowly appear as applications become, iOS 8 savvy, to use the old term. And that what you're talking about, having, the activity viewer type thing and having it list URLs and having some sort of system for you to configure, like, oh, I don't want, probably one of the reasons that might have been canned is the whole idea of like, on the Mac, applications that would say that they can handle, star, I handle any application. So the open with, you'd always see this application for every single file, like sort of spamming the thing, like what can open a URL? And you see a list of 9,000 applications. So you need some way to manage that as well. And that's another complication in the UI. And that's the type of thing that could make you say, we're not quite ready to do that. And the same thing with like sandboxing. Do we just load do we load like a loadable bundle or a framework, but run it in the sandbox of your application so that you have access to your document container and everything, but you're on the screen at the same time as somebody else. And again, if they're doing side-by-side apps on the iPad anyway, they've already got to do probably 2 sandboxed applications that each have access to their own containers, both on screen at the same time, which is, not a big deal. They're called Windows back in the old world. So if they're doing that anyway, there's place for that. But yeah, it seems like a Maverick-style release where there's lots of new APIs for developers to adopt, a couple of new things on the settings screen, some new applications, like the health book stuff and everything like that. But, not it's not going to be like iOS 7, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think it really needs to be. I mean, iOS 7 was really a remarkable release in that they crammed in not only a massive visual overhaul and lots of rewriting of the built-in apps to accommodate that, but a lot of cool frameworks, like major stuff, things like TextKit and all the background refresh stuff and the URL session stuff, like major changes to frameworks, and they fit all that into one release. I mean, what I would like to see from 8 is, besides the interactive communication stuff, which is a big deal, just take all those frameworks they added last year and just do some tweaks here and there. Like there's certain limitations in URL sessions that I'd like to see lifted, but it's mostly minor stuff. The frameworks are getting really good. Even simple things. Like I was complaining 2 episodes ago or last week, I was complaining how like the keychain API is ridiculous to use because it's still one of the old C-based APIs, and they haven't made a nice Objective-C wrapper around it. If they just did more of that, like just wrap a bunch of the stuff that's hard to use, like the contacts API and the keychain stuff like that, like stuff that still uses old C APIs, like just wrap some of that in new classes so it's easier for people to use. I would love just a release like that, just doing a bunch of small tweaks and improvements to the existing frameworks, and then having 1 or 2 major new features and capabilities like the inter-app sharing things.
Yeah, we'll see.
And then there's like the idea of, any new category or whatever is probably going to have a bunch of new frameworks and stuff that you're not going to care about if you don't have any interaction with whatever the hell is new. If you're not writing Apple TV apps, then you don't care about whatever new things they added there. If you're not going to integrate with some Apple wearable, then you don't care about those frameworks. But those are always, the extras that they add on top. Sort of like the controller, the hardware controller interface. If you're not writing a game that has to have support for hardware controller, you're never going to look at that new API. But hey, it's new in iOS 7, right? So there's always that bushel of things that can be new in iOS 8. And with Healthbook supposedly in there that we all seem to believe is coming, there's got to be a bunch of new APIs to do with that, but maybe you're just not going to look at them because, especially if an Apple wearable doesn't come out, you're like, well, fine. This is going to be so long before a third-party wearable takes advantage of this anyway, and I'm not interested in it for my podcast app, so I'll just ignore that.
Do you think that there'll be any sort of new Springboard functionality? Like everyone keeps calling for widgets in either Notification Center or Springboard. I'm extremely unconvinced that would ever happen, but is there anything that you can think of that would make Springboard better?
Yeah, have the little icons not slide. Someone tweeted that, and I thought it was a reasonably good idea. Have you be able to delete icons without all the other ones rearranging themselves? I mean, just trying to deal with rearranging icons on the device is just torture. Like, it's a terrible game that we do to ourselves. Like, people just don't rearrange them because it's so hard. There's certain positions, like the lower right corner is torture, or one of the corners.
It's really hard to get there because it'll like scroll over to the next pane or something.
Yeah, or like as you're going through pages, especially on my super slow A5, as I'm going, like I'm holding it against the edge and the things are scrolling by. Sometimes I guess the animation takes too long and it will end up shoving icons off. Like, I'm not landing on this page. I'm saying go to the last page. I'm going to take this icon from the first page into the last. And as part of that process, I will bump icons off all the intermediary pages. So by the time I get to the last page, 2 new icons are there and I've shifted everything over. It's just maddening. And like, if when I moved one, the other ones wouldn't slide into its place, that would help me rearrange things with a slight extra little bit of sanity. But they're never going to do that. But it drives me insane.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of Springboard changes that I would really care that much about, with the exception of, for God's sakes, fix Newsstand or give apps a way to get out of it, or give users a way to take apps out of it, because it is so annoying for everybody now, for publishers and for users. Like I read stuff that's in Newsstand, and it's like on the iPad. I think it's this way on the phone. I only do it on the pad, but you have the app, you exit the app, and you have to separately then exit Newsstand with another tap on the home button. You have to wait for the animations to complete.
Staring at a folder.
Right. It's so bad. And it's like, just, I read these same apps, like one of them's a New York Times app. I read that every night. Can't I just move it out of there, please? Just let me put it on the home screen, please, so I can get rid of the stupid Newsstand crap. Like, it's so bad.
I mean, hell, let them all appear in Newsstand, fine. But also let them be outside. Like, no one will ever go into Newsstand. Right. Like, if there's some person,
or just let me drag them in and out.
We need to group them all in one spot. What Casey mentioned though about like the widgets, or like in Windows parlance, live tiles or something like that. That is a complication that I see Apple not wanting to add, but it may be inevitable. That the Today view that they have that shows you all a collection of information, which is kind of configurable, but not really.
Yeah, it's not that good.
And we just have a bunch of icons and there's no real widgets. Like, opening the door to that complexity is something they definitely don't want to do. But at a certain point, when everybody else's phone has some way to sort of customize what you see on either your home screen or on your lock screen in ways that are beyond what Apple allows you to customize, I think Apple is wise to not do that stuff as much as everyone else is. But I think they're far enough behind now that they could make another baby step in that direction with iOS 8 and no one would freak out.
If the remote view controllers are a thing that are being used for inter-app communication, could that also be used for a widget, like in the home screen or in Notification Center? I
mean, in theory, yes. Like, in theory, they could use the background refresh system and the remote view controller system together to just have an app periodically update something. And, you'd be woken up every, it wouldn't be frequent. You wouldn't be able to run a news ticker constantly scrolling across, or, constantly changing things maybe. But maybe they'd wake you up every, 20 minutes or something to let you put an update there.
Can you even change your icon like the calendar app? Is that even public?
No, that's never been allowed.
And same thing with your default, whatever is the default ping, like the thing that comes up before your app is launched?
Yeah, you can't change that either. Newsstand can change its icon, but other apps can't do either.
So like we're talking about widgets, and they haven't even allowed you to change either your icon or your default image, your default launch image. And Apple's allowed to change it because they're allowed to have a functional calendar application, but no one else is. So forget about live tiles. You can't even update your freaking icon. So like I said, they should make some more moves in that direction. They don't have to go whole hog like, hey, you can have a view that you control that gets updated every n minutes that's on the home screen that's the size of 5 icons put together, like the live tile thing. Like that's too far, but they're way back in the prehistoric era with the limitations. And a lot of that stuff was like, oh, we don't want people burning CPU and stuff like that. But that, they've come so far in terms of background refresh and everything. And with, the hardware that we have now, the restrictions on, no, you can't change your calendar icon to be today's date. That would take too much battery. That's ridiculous. It's just, that stuff should be opened up a little bit more.
Remember, for a while, their calendar icon didn't update. It wasn't until like OS 3 or 4. Like it would just always be showing the wrong date. Well, it would be showing the wrong date most days of the month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I wonder, do you guys think they would ever, and I think my answer is no, but do you think they would ever give the ability to set default apps to third-party apps for things like your default mail app, your default web browser?
It seems highly unlikely, doesn't it?
Right, because they have that on OS 10, but that's different. So, do you think? Because that would go a long way with the URL or with the data sharing system, like the contract intents thing. That would go a long way towards not only enabling a bunch of third-party apps to be better, but enabling what a lot of users want anyway. Like it's not just like, oh, Google wants to invade with Chrome and Maps. It's like a whole bunch of people are choosing to use Chrome and Google Maps anyway, and it just sucks that they don't have full system integration. If you tap a mail link in something, it doesn't just open Chrome or...
Yeah, the mail is the worst one, though, because I can imagine that Apple will be like, well, we have to keep you on Safari because the web is such an important thing, and only we get to use the good JavaScript engine and blah, blah, blah. We don't want people changing this. But mail, man, like, there are so many good, interesting mail applications, and I bet mail is the application that most people are likely to use a third-party one, because how many people use Chrome? Probably not a lot, but I think the Gmail app is probably very popular.
Yeah, I bet you're right. Well, Chrome was very popular, but I think it's kind of fading now. But your Gmail app is very, very popular, no question.
And then you have to, like, I'm setting up these iOS devices for my kids. You have to set up an email account in the mail app because every application that sends email is going to throw you into that stupid mail app. And if you don't have an account configured, you just can't use that feature of those applications. So you need some sort of little Sentinel mail application configured in Apple Mail just to support emailing from all the other applications that you're going to use.
Yeah.
What about services? Are we going to see any improvement there?
Like web services?
Well, like iCloud, for example.
Oh, lol, no.
Well, they keep making things better with the iCloud core storage and the key value store. I'm sure there'll be improvements there and blah blah blah. But I don't know any new iCloud APIs. I don't know,
or even just it actually working.
Well, they've been making steady progress in that area, but it's like fundamentally, it's like an architecture type thing where you're not expecting an API that you just want it to work within the bounds of its original design. But if the original design precludes it ever having a certain level of performance or ever having a certain level of reliability, you're just like, well, just do as well as you can within that. And that's why I mentioned a new API, like a new API that does a new thing architected differently. Like as you talked about the push API thing, you can imagine that the back end for the push notification system is substantially different than the back end for the iCloud core data. And those different choices they made, influence how the API is designed and how it performs and how well it does what it's being asked to do. And so I think new iCloud APIs would be your opportunity to make something much, much better. Whereas the alternative thing is just take the existing APIs with the existing design parameters and make them better and remove the bugs and add the features. And they did a lot of that with iCloud, with core data, iCloud stuff in Mavericks. And I'm sure they're continuing that, but that's not the type of thing that's going to wow someone in a session,
I feel like we're being even more non-committal and hand-wavy than usual. Like last year, we knew that it was going to be a visual refresh, and we were pretty confident about that. And that's about all we knew, but it's a lot more than I feel like we know now. We know about HealthBook. What else do we really know with any sort of certainty? Anything?
the scheduling is really throwing things off because we have these teas starting from late last year of new category, but it's too vague, so we don't know what it is. So we just have to pick from like the vague wearable, vague TV, unknown, whatever. That tells us nothing. And the gimmies to be like, oh, Mac hardware revisions, well, the CPUs are delayed, so it's like everything's up in the air. We feel like if you had to predict what Apple was going to introduce this year, I think we would be more confident. But it's like, what will they have ready in time for June?
Yeah, that's a really tough call. You're right. I mean, there's no guarantee that they're going to have anything mind-blowing ready for June. Like it could just be like, all right, here's a visual refresh for Mac OS 10. Here's a less significant improvement in iOS 8, and go for it. Here you go. And here's a bunch of sessions on how to use the new stuff in iOS 10 and Mac OS 10.10 or iOS 8 and Mac OS 10.10.10.10. There's nothing stopping them from that just being it. Like there might be no hardware announcements, no new category announcements, nothing exciting at all except the new software, which in a developer conference, that is technically adequate. It also is not unprecedented. They've done that before.
Yeah, then you'd be reading the tea leaves to see like, they're really emphasizing being able to draw your app at different sizes. And then you'd be like, is that for the bigger iPhone 6? Is that for side-by-side on the iPad Air? Like, you can read those tea leaves. And then there's the hidden stuff like, M7, where you don't find out about until, the September iPhone announcement. Oh, then here's these new APIs, and they were kind of in iOS 7 all along. But, like, they could do that. I think that would be sufficient for a conference to say we're revising all our OSs, and here's a bunch of hints for new APIs, but it would be quite a letdown after the past couple of fun years of like, even just stuff like the Mac Pro, where you're like, I think that was an exciting announcement, even if it didn't have much impact on people's lives in general. It definitely adds to the keynote experience.
I mean, as a user of all this stuff, and as a developer using all this stuff, I would actually be really happy with just software improvements, because Apple has a lot of potential software improvements, especially if they're tackling a major refresh in 10.10.10. There's room for this. Like they could do a lot here. I would love if they weren't distracted on all sorts of new projects and could focus their engineering resources on the things that need it. I just don't believe that that's the case. I believe they are working on big stuff. It is pulling resources away from everything else, and it is going to be new, but it might not be ready yet, or maybe we'll all be proven wrong. I mean, honestly, it's kind of fun not knowing so much ahead of time, because when there's a whole bunch of leaks, it kind of ruins the fun and the anticipation of the keynote.
This will sound great next week when all the leaks have come out. People listening to the show.
Yeah, we're recording this almost a week before we're going to publish it. So yeah, you're right. You're right. Like there's all the good leaks that come out next week, and well, we'll find out.
So I put two questions in the show notes here. One was, what are you most looking forward to at WWDC? And then the other one was just kind of the same question rephrased, but a little bit different angle. Is if you had to choose one realistic thing that you want, your wish list thing that you want to see announced at WWDC, like you don't have to be predicting that it's going to happen, but it has to be, within the realm of possibility. What would that be?
Definitely inter-app communication. And I think it's possible. I don't know how, but I think it could be. I think it could be done.
That's definitely realistic, and that if they say something about that in the keynote, you'll be the most excited about that.
I don't know if I'll be Mike Hurley at Marco's XOXO talk excited, but I'll be
that was awesome.
But I'll be really excited. I don't know. We'll see.
Marco,
so you're asking what I think is the most likely, or what I would want the most?
No, this is like your most wished for thing, but it has to be realistic.
Okay.
In it to be announced at the keynote. It doesn't have to be like you're predicting it, but like, man, it's possible for Apple to do this, and I would be really excited if they did.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with Spheric in the chat room with a Thunderbolt Retina display. But if that's not realistic, which I think it is, I think they could very much do 4K Thunderbolt Retina display.
Yep, that is definitely realistic. I mean,
otherwise, I would say Casey's thing of internet communication. And if I can't do that because it's already taken, then I would say new UIKit like framework for OS 10.
Realistic is the wrong word. What we're saying is like feasible, like because Apple would never announce a monitor at it doesn't seem like the monitor would ever rate enough to get on a thing, but it's a thing they could make.
It didn't seem like the Mac Pro would ever rate enough to get in the thing.
Oh, sure. Well, the Mac Pro is interesting and new, but anyway, like Apple could make that right now if they wanted. Why are they not doing it? Because they hate us. But that's that's realistic. My thing, I think, it's actually kind of surprised me. Is the reason I put this question in is, Retina MacBook Air, a new form factor, a MacBook Air with a non-crappy screen that's also better viewing angles, Retina, and a more interesting. Maybe it's not tapered as much. Maybe it's just like a super thin 13-inch thing. That's like I said. I think they could show it. I think they probably have it all designed up and ready. They just can't ship it because there's no CPUs for it. But hey, I'll wait 6 months for a computer I'm not going to buy anyway.
You've done that before.
Yeah, exactly. I like seeing new laptops introduced. I was excited when the Retina MacBook Pros were introduced, and I'll be excited again to see what the next evolution of the Air is. So I'm really hoping that they show that, even though it's not ready.
I wonder, do you think the need for a Retina 12-inch MacBook Air is that strong? Because the 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro is so good. It's such a great all-arounder for so many people. It is not that expensive. It has the nice Retina screen. It is very small. It is almost Air-sized, but it's big enough still to have a nice-sized battery and a nice CPU in there. Like, do you think the 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro reduces a lot of the need for the MacBook Air?
No, because I think they'll have to separate from each other a little bit, but basically what I'm looking for is the Air internals. So forget about a discrete GPU ever. I don't think the 13 doesn't have a discrete anyway, but it's possible they could in that size form factor. And like I said, maybe it won't be tapered as much as the old ones because they got to fit more battery for the Retina display. But it should still be, if you put one in one hand, one in the other, it would be clear this is not a 13-inch Pro. This is the 12-inch Air. And it may end up pushing the 13-inch up market. Maybe the 13 suddenly starts sprouting more powerful GPUs, if not a discrete one, whereas the Air is always going to have whatever the super, ultra, everything on one chip CPU that Intel offers, and the 13-inch Pro is going to have this isn't the super low power one. It's a little bit more powerful than that. So, I mean, I think there's room in the lineup for it, and I'm excited to see. I'm kind of bored of the form factor of the MacBook Pros now that we've sort of evolved to what we think is the final form here, and they just keep getting thinner. But the Air is, I still think there's room for something that looks a little different than the current wedge type things. And I'm so sick of those screens on the current Airs. I really want them to make a nicer screen on an Air-sized device. Someone in the chat room asked about iPad Pro. The iPads were just revised. Like, I don't even think that's within the realm of feasibility. I don't think they're...
Well, not in June. Yeah, this fall they'll probably announce new iPads, but
and I don't think it's the type of thing, because the MacBook Airs are coming. There's going to be MacBook Airs based on Broadwell, and it could conceivably happen this calendar year. iPad Pro, I think is outside the realm of possibility, just because iPad Air is not that old yet. But who knows? With iOS 8 side by side, I guess they could throw it in there. But I would be more excited actually to see what the new Retina Air looks like, hoping that it's a different shape than just another increasingly thin slate type thing. I don't know.
I don't know if it counts as realistic or not, but the thing I'm most looking forward to is there going to be a new product category? And if so, what the crap is it? And I would love for it to be something that's surprising. And we'll see. I don't know. I can't even conjecture what it would be.
See, that's not my most look forward to thing because I can't pin it down. It's just an amorphous cloud of whatever. And I'm not interested probably in anything wearable. And a TV thing, I have so little faith that anything they'll do will be interesting to me. And a revised Apple TV, I'm not sure I would. Maybe I would get it because it's $99. Who cares? Whatever. But like, it's too. I don't know what it is yet. I can't say that I'm most looking forward to that because I don't just want the novelty. Like, I just want Apple to do something different. No. I have to see what it is. If it's something awesome, I'll love it. But if it's something I'm not interested in, yeah, it's great they did a new thing, but I'm never going to get it, so whatever.
Random question. Are they going to transition the MacBook Pros to be black aluminum in the style of the Mac Pro?
Yeah, I would love it because to tell you what, like the Mac Pro is a nice looking machine. It is basically, the color is basically a glossy version of the iPhone 5S slate color. And the iPhone 5S slate color is really nice too, and they could definitely use that because glossy would not work on a MacBook. Obviously, it would look terrible. It would have, well, they did it before, but glossy metal I think would show a lot more fingerprints than the old plastic MacBooks did. So I don't see that. I would love it if if a Retina Thunderbolt display matched the new Mac Pro in color and finish. Might be a little reflective, but if it's just on the bezel or the bezel, as John would say, then who cares?
They'll offer it in black, but it's $150 extra.
Wow, old reference.
Remember when they did that?
Yep.
The black books.
Nice.
Yep. That was around the time I bought my first Mac. I don't know. I feel like it could be a really neat differentiator to keep aluminum for the quote unquote consumer grade stuff and make everything black for the professional grade stuff. So a black Thunderbolt display, a black Mac Pro, black MacBook Pros, perhaps even a black, what do you call the Magic Mouse that isn't a Magic Mouse? The Magic touchpad, trackpad thing. Which then begs the question, would you have a black Magic Mouse? Do they sunset the Magic Mouse brand and make me very sad?
I would love for them to kill that stupid mouse and make a decent mouse. It seems unlikely, but
I like it.
I like it too.
Yeah, I mean, a mouse is, something like that. Something that you hold is going to have this broad spectrum of, do you like a high mouse or a low mouse, a wide mouse or a skinny mouse, a mouse that's contoured or a mouse that's not, and so it's not going to say this is a bad mouse. I'm just going to say, I don't like a mouse that's that low. I don't like a mouse that's that heavy. I don't like a mouse that's that low. And so if that's the only mouse that Apple makes, Apple doesn't make a mouse for me. And historically, not all of Apple's mice have been that heavy and that low. This is a new kind of design direction. I'm ready to see what the next design direction is for mice, but I don't think they care enough to change it. And so I'll just continue I've been using a third-party mouse since the one that was semicircle on the bottom. They came with like the PowerMac 6100. That's the last Apple mouse that I used, I think.
See, I use the Magic Mouse because I am a really heavy user of screens that they used to call it, the virtual desktops. And to use a third-party mouse that doesn't have multi-touch to swipe between my virtual desktops is terrible, or at least in any mouse I've ever tried.
I have to bring the violin music back.
Yeah, you do need to bring the violin music back.
No, it's true though. Apple's the touch surface on the Magic Mouse is so much better than the touch surface on other touch surface type mice that I've used. It's true of like Apple's trackpads compared to everyone else's trackpads. Like everyone else just uses whatever the cheapest sensor they can put in the device, and Apple doesn't.
Yeah, and so I would love to see a more bulbous Magic Mouse. I don't think it'll happen, but I don't care for the trackpad very much. I can use it, but I don't care for it. I grew up on the Track Point on IBM ThinkPad, so I still miss having one of those. And when I'm at my desk for more than a few minutes, I tend to like to use a proper mouse, and because of my obsession with virtual desktops, it has to be a Magic Mouse.
Yeah, the Magic Mouse is a beautiful piece of sculpture. I love how it looks. I just don't like holding it in my hand.
I just love the inertial scrolling with it, because before this, I used the Logitech MX Revolution that had this awesome, like, heavy weighted flywheel scroll thing that if you flicked it hard enough and you had their software installed, it would unlock and spin freely for a while until you like slowed it down or stopped it with your finger, then it would lock and become notchy again. It was a fantastic mouse that was plagued with terrible software and terrible support by like alternative mouse drivers on OS X, and then they stopped making it. And so it was awesome when it worked, and it worked so rarely. Now you can't buy a new one, and so the Magic Mouse with its touch inertial scrolling kind of replaced that for me, because like once you get used to the inertia scrolling, having an old like notchy type scroll wheel where you're scrolling by like a non-accelerating rate is barbaric, like an animal.
And on that bombshell,
thanks a lot to our three sponsors this week, Lynda.com, Dash, and NatureBox. And we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I was going to say, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel if we're talking about mouse revisions to the mouse.
Yeah.
Do
you think they're going to do it?
Predictions? No, it's just like, what possible hardware does Apple has that needs to be revised? Well, The Magic Trackpad's pretty old. Mouse hasn't been changed in a while. Apple doesn't seem to want to make monitors anymore.
I would like to see if they do end up doing some kind of cosmetic update with a lot of this stuff, like the aluminum keyboard and stuff like that. Like they've used that bare brushed aluminum look for so long that it might help to just do a little refresh on that. That's what I'm saying. Like, do something like the space gray color or the Mac Pro's glossy space gray looking color. Just to do like a cosmetic refresh with not that much different under the hood for all their little peripherals and stuff that all just have brushed aluminum now.
That's what I was saying. Like the MacBook Pro is like in their final form, because it's like they went to aluminum and they slowly revised, removed doors, sealed everything in, soldered everything to the board, and now it's like, okay, this is the logical conclusion of making a MacBook Pro out of a solid brick of aluminum, hollowing it out and shoving the insides in. And now it's like, all right, can you change the color? Can you change the texture? Can you change the shape? Because they're not going to go away from aluminum, that's for sure.
Well, that's why I think if they were to hypothetically make a black Pro line, that would be the perfect moment, like Marco was saying, to do this light visual refresh. So it's more than just painting black on top of aluminum.
Come on, Retina Thunderbolt. Come on, you can do it.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Sapphire.
There's all these rumors about where Sapphire is going to go. I think it's pretty clear that they're going to keep using it for Touch ID, of course. And they need a lot of it to do that because Touch ID is in every iPhone 5S, and you would expect that this fall when there's new iPhones and iPads, it's now going to be in the new iPhone and the last year's model if they keep the 5S around. So there's going to be even more for iPhone demand. Hopefully they would add it to iPads because it's really weird once you get used to it on the phone to not have it on your iPad. So you're looking at a lot of Sapphire demands right there. Versus some of the rumors that say, like, if you're going to use it for the whole iPhone screen, that's a lot more. Like, it's such a massive quantity more. I don't think they could make enough of it, even in their new plant in Arizona or whatever. Like, that would require so much more Sapphire than just what they have now. I just think the volume is impractical.
That would be like an iPhone 7.
Right. So maybe, if they are doing something that has like a watch face, you could see plausibly, okay, maybe that's where it would be going. Something where you have some kind of wearable with, a small to medium-sized screen. You need to be very, very resilient. It could go there. But this could just be one of those things where, there's just not much of a story here. It's for iPhone home buttons to just make more of them. I
don't know. I'm getting more and more excited the more I realize that we don't know crap about what's going on.
Yeah, it definitely is more exciting this way. Like when, there's been so many recent keynotes in the last few years where almost everything has been ruined ahead of time, and it just isn't fun. Like, we still go and we still pretend to be excited, but it's so much better when we're actually genuinely surprised.
It's always excited for me because I always have the terror of when they're going to announce the release date for OS X.
Right.
That's true. You've won the lottery for the most part so far.
Yeah, but they could say, and it's shipping in 3 weeks, and then I'm screwed.
All right. Do we want to do titles?
Are there any? Let's check this crazy showbot.
Yeah, my crazy hack together showbot from 20 minutes before the show started. By the way, I apologize in advance for how crappy this is.
Where are you saving the data?
In MySQL. What do you mean?
It's a little overkill.
What would you do? If you had 20 minutes to rewrite this, where would you store it?
Memory.
I don't know. I guess if you got the database there already. If you're supposed to be an iOS developer, you should be storing this in a plist. Duh.
No, this is actually, it was a fun exercise because I've very rarely coded like mad under time pressure. I certainly haven't done it recently, so it was kind of fun. It was like a fun hackathon for 20 minutes with myself. Which sounds terrible, but no, it was it was fun. It was and obviously there's tons of stuff I can do to make it better. It probably won't be worth that, but now I have something where, like, if I end up open sourcing this framework that I've been wanting to open source forever, this could be like the test app that I open source with it and say, here's an example of how to use it.
Is this not sorted by vote? I have to click to sort by vote.
There's also no Ajax voting, which is much worse than the sorting problems, but
yeah.
I ran out of time. Come on, give me a break.
Form submissions. The old ways are best.
Oh, John, only you can bitch and moan about something that was whipped together in 20 minutes out of the blue and not sound like a world-class jerk doing it.
But I think it sounds like it should take less time. and be less effort. Like form submission is the hard way to do it. You make an entire form with a little field and a button, and then anyway.
How hard do you think it is to make a form?
It just seems more heavyweight, and then the whole page has to reload, and you lose your place. It's like you're sacrificing functionality for I guess if you don't know the APIs already, but if you have jQuery loaded, you just attach handlers and do the submission. It's like super easy.
The final form, that's interesting. I like that. Oh, I've now lost my place because I voted for it.
Wearing electronics is just not cool.
It's true. No, it's like these modern smartwatches. They're like calculator watches in the 80s.
They're worse. The calculator watches were sleek and elegant in comparison to like a Pebble.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, they were. Yes.
Don't you remember them? They were terrible.
Yeah, they were way thinner than a Pebble, way smaller than a Pebble.
No, Pebble's way nicer.
Pebble's not nicer than a calculator watch.
It is. It's not by a lot, but it is.
Oh, the Pebble looks like you're wearing like a lunchbox on your wrist, an ugly lunchbox with like grommets and like it's terrible.
I don't know. I don't think it's that bad, but it's not great, obviously. But yeah, it's just
my grandfather had a metal calculator watch, like it was like a grown up, it was a Casio, I think, but it was like the fancy, gentleman's one where instead of just being plastic with a bunch of little plastic nubs, it was all metal and smooth with flush keys. It was awesome.
What else is going on?
Oh, I didn't do my homework, but I did play Flappy Golf. Does that count as a game?
No.
Sure, why not? I play Flappy Golf too.
It isn't that good of a game. I mean, it's literally just like Super Stickman Golf 2 with the Flappy Bird thing as the mechanic instead of balls. But
I know, but that's a clever, remix / commentary on Flappy Bird.
It is.
And it's a good way to reuse resources they already had. And I think if you had never seen Super Stickman Golf, it's a reason. Like it works in a world where Flappy Bird exists. I think it was clever. I just don't enjoy playing it that much.
Yeah, I kind of wish they had like made original courses for it, because some of the ones that come with it just don't make sense, and it's kind of obvious. But otherwise, yeah, it's a fun diversion. It's a little too easy, and there's zero replay value, but it's funny. So anyway, I did play that, and I was greatly annoyed by the Game Center pop-ups in it. You were totally right. Game Center ruins everything. And I eventually logged into Game Center just to make it stop bothering me to log into Game Center.
And the thing is, like, it used to be that a green felt thing would come down and spoil your application, and now a bubbulous white thing comes down and spoil. Like it's
and you have to sit there watching it animate in. Like you have to sit there for like 7 or 8 seconds watching this thing show itself to you.
And it will never match anything that it goes on top of, because no one is ever going to make an app that looks like either the old Game Center or the new Game Center. So it's like, worried all about this visual stuff. Let me take a window from another application that doesn't match yours and shove it on top of your UI. Like, it's never going to work, ever.
So you love it.
Do you think Game Center will get any updates in iOS 8?
I don't know.
I'm guessing 0. I'm guessing like literally no changes at all to Game Center.
I would love to be in the meeting where they decided, or we're getting rid of the felt. What says game to you? And someone said, ooh, I know, puddles of colored goo, puddles of colored goo. I mean, it's not even. Maybe they were smoking something. I don't understand.
This is why I'm just so, as I said last week with like the getting some new blood in the executive team.
I don't know. I think it's designed by people who don't play games, but I don't know if they could be young people too. Like, I think everyone who works on Game Center should be forced to get an Xbox Live account, to get a PlayStation account, to get a Steam, and just like, not that those are great examples of interface, but just see what everyone else is doing in the realm of things to keep track of, like your friends and what games that you play. And like, this is not new territory. Tons of other companies do this, and they all do it in a way that is more successful visually and technologically, frankly, than what Apple does. So I get the feeling that the people doing Game Center either have never used those things, or they've used them, but their bosses say, make it like this, and they just do what their bosses say.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about the bosses being the potential problem here. Like the settings icon in iOS 7, where it has all these these interlined gears, or these concentric gears. Like, do you think this is like how a bunch of 50-year-old men view gears? Like, oh well, how about on a bike? That's where we've seen gears before. That's what settings should mean. Like, it seems like, I don't know. It just seems so out of touch.
Those aren't bike gears; they're watch gears. They have to be.
Oh, even better.
Old men with watches, yeah.
How about a high-end watch? Which, like, how many 25-year-olds have ever even seen a high-end watch that has the exposed gears visible through the transparent glass. Like, how many people have ever seen that are, of this generation at all? I mean, it's...
I'm kind of excited to see the OS 10 like new look introduction video, because I think that was the best part of the iOS 7 announcement, was that little video they put together. It's like the first time we were seeing iOS 7, and it was crazy looking, and it had all those animations. You know that video?
Oh yeah, and that was actually... That was a major moment in last year's keynote because it was so shocking. And, I was down on them before for leaning too much on videos in the recent keynotes where, like, I don't think it's a very good keynote if we have to sit there and watch, like, 20 minutes of canned video clips that are basically commercials. Like, I know the whole keynote is a commercial in a way, but, like, at least, give us the dignity of a human presentation as much as you can and just use videos sparingly. And I thought last year they went over the line and used too much video. That being said, that was a really good video, and that was a good use of it.
Yeah, and the difference is that in the olden days, back when Jobs would do Macworld keynotes and everything, the first time you saw the UI was either on a slide, like they would show you elements of it on a slide, or like some sort of theme image, and then they would go to a computer screen where he would be using it and you'd see the screen.
Right.
Whereas this was a produced sort of like, what you're seeing is super high res images of their sort of design document animating together, showing, and I think that is a much more interesting way to be introduced to a UI than seeing screenshots or seeing close-ups of theme things. And so I hope OS 10 rates getting a similar video.
Yeah, when it's that dramatic of a redesign, I agree. If it's like, here's a new version of iWork, like I don't think that matters as much. But I agree with the major redesign.
It's about a new design language, or like what everything's Helvetica and whiter,
really, really thin.
No more overlapping windows.
Yeah, well, that's so last decade,
exactly.
Last 4 decades.
Did Johnny Ive go on screen and explain why overlapping windows are so passé?
Well, they aren't true to the object self. You don't really have overlapping monitors. They're not true to the materials that you're using. They're unapologetically tiled.
If only they did that, and then Federighi would come in from the side and push Johnny off his stool and say, "No, seriously, we didn't do that. It's still a functioning OS."
On a random note, about 5 or 10 minutes ago, I started looking into a Node IRC package, and I now have a show bot that's at least listening for suggestions. That is doing 0 with them, but it's listening for them.
The bot's the easy part. Once you have the library, you can make it join the channel, you make it watch everything. When something matches !S and a bunch of stuff, you build the URL and you hit it.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Maybe I'll fiddle with this and see if I can get it up.
That was my first CPAN module, was a bot, a library for making bots.
You couldn't just make the bot. You had to make like the bot factory.
No, it's the same thing. It was for. Do you guys remember? You don't remember this because you weren't into Macs, but there was an application called Hotline. Do you remember that? Maybe.
Nope.
No.
Well, anyway, it's just like IRC, but it's like it was an application, a client server application written by like a 16-year-old. So right away, it's going to be awesome. And it was for the Mac only, and it was used basically to trade illegal software. Like people would set up servers in their house, and you could join it as a user, and you could get an account, and they had files, and it was basically like how to design your own local IRC thing. But anyway, the protocol was all binary, because all the person was doing, I think, was just shoving like native C structures out onto the wire. I don't even think he was doing like H10 or, all things that changed into network byte order and all that stuff. It was just like native spewing out C structs onto the wire. And it was not documented, so I had to reverse engineer it by watching hex dumps of the network traffic and figuring out the packet formats. And once I had done that, then I could write a library that knew how to read and write those packets. And once I'd written the library, then you can write a bot. That's what I did. My bot was cool.
Well, your bot factory was cool. Someone else made the cool bot.
No, I made the bot. I made the framework to make the bot, and then I made the bot with the framework. You had icons and stuff, and so like the bot would change its icon based on what people said, and you could send and receive files to people, and you could have private conversations with the bot, and it would log things. It was all the things that IRC bots do, but not in IRC, and with a few extra capabilities that don't exist in IRC. But yeah, Hotline was terrible. That code is terrible. The module is terrible. But very first CPAN module. And so Casey didn't have to do that. He just downloaded a Node module. He was up and running.
Yeah, you two keep blabbing. I might actually have it posted in a Marcos thing here in a few minutes.
why don't we just have Casey rewrite the whole thing in Node?
That's what I should do.
I mean, it's not if I could do this in 20 minutes in PHP, you could probably can't you do it in like 30 seconds? You just type in like, it's one line in Node plus 150,000 lines of dependencies.
Pretty much.
Yeah, just do that. Why would I write this in PHP if you can do that? Because the one thing I really don't want to have to try to figure out IRC stuff with PHP. That's I know I'd have to use some kind of third-party code, and it would probably be awful. And I'd rather not do that. So yeah, just figure it out. That's your next project. That's your new homework. Rather than play a game this week, do this. You can probably write this whole thing in less time than it takes to beat Monument Valley.
I already did my homework, though.
Yeah, I know. I'm giving you my homework to do.
Yeah, you can't assign homework when you haven't even done your own homework.
I was busy playing Flappy Golf and could not play Monument Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Monument Valley is a better game than Flappy Golf.
I hope so.
Low bar, but just saying.